304 An Introduction to God. Torah Mizmowr. Torah's Song. 8. Chazown, Revealing. Prophetic Guidance. Now that we have considered what the Torah has to say about the Torah, pondered the merits of the Torah from the perspective of the martial, Proverbs, and have learned how to properly observe the Torah from the Mizmowr, Psalms, it is time to reflect upon what the prophets revealed regarding the Torah. And when it comes to prophets, they don't get any bolder or better than Yahowah, a name which has been corrupted by theologians to Isaiah to keep you from knowing that it is Yahowah who saves. The revealing communication, Chazown, the written prophetic record of the relationship agreement and covenant contract enabled by the ability to perceive the vision, from chaza, to see and perceive, to look intelligently, to observe and understand, of Yada Yahowah, liberation, deliverance, freedom, and salvation are from Yahowah, a compound of Yasha, to remove from harm's way, to keep safe, to liberate and deliver, to make free and save, and Yahowah, son, ben, of amotes, trustworthy and steadfast, from amon, valid, confirming, upholding, supportive, and establishing, and amats, to be strong, courageous, secure, steadfast, and bold, whereby, Asher, beneficially as a result of the relationship, he compiled and revealed a written prophetic record, Chazown, he intelligently observed, being perceptive and discriminating to see. Thereby receiving information from God which he chose to 305 communicate prominently, concerning, about and in proximity to the Most High's, Yahushalem, source from which teaching, instruction, guidance, and direction regarding reconciliation and restoration flow, a compound of Yara, source of teaching and guidance, the basis of Torah, and Shalom, to completely restore and totally reconcile, Yahweh, related to Yer, beloved of Yer, in the days, Bar Yaumim, of Uziyahu. Boldness and empowerment are from Yer, from Oz, to strengthen and embolden, to prevail by being steadfast, and Yahowah, commonly known as Uzziah, 791 to 739 BCE, yathowm, Yahowah is perfect, complete, and upright, from Yahowah, and Tam, perfect and complete, lacking nothing, typically transliterated, Jotham, 750 to 734 BCE, Ahaz, he has grasped hold, known as Ahaz, 734 to 718 BCE. Yoikyah, I am strengthened by Yahowah, from Chazak, to grow firm and resolute, rigid and steadfast, courageous and strong, prevailing by being emboldened by Yahowah, commonly known as Hezekiah, 718 to 689 BCE, rulers, Melech, leaders and kings, of Yahweh, relating to Yahowah, beloved by Yer, and related to Yahowah. Yashar, salvation is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:1. Prophecy is Yahowah's signature, his mark, serving as proof that he authored the testimony, in which the predictions are presented. God wants readers to know that they can trust what he has to say. In this regard, you should know that God isn't actually predicting anything but is, instead, providing us with an assessment of what he has witnessed in the prophet's future, sometimes 2,000 to 3,000 years in advance of when these events will unfold. As light, and in the seventh dimension, God can see the past, present, and future in our material universe simultaneously. Therefore, he is not predestining anything 306 but is, simply, reporting where a litany of bad choices will lead mankind. The future he has described will play out exactly as he has foretold, not because it is his will, but because man's will has taken precedence, coming to haunt humankind through religion and governance. In this regard, if a text claims to speak for God, as is the case with the books ascribed to Enoch, Ezekiel, Paul, and Muhammad, prophecy provides the easiest, surest, and most direct way to ascertain the validity of those assertions. If there is no prophecy, as is the case with Muhammad's Quran, God did not inspire the author. And since prophecy is inclusive of past events as well as future ones, books like Enoch, Ezekiel, and the Quran which contradict Yahowah's accounting and are inconsistent with recorded history or science are unreliable. Their authors have been presumptuous. Further, even if a text includes prophecy, if so much as one prediction is invalid, the writer was not inspired by Yahowah. This is one of many problems with Paul. His lone attempt at predicting the future was wrong, errantly claiming that his rapture would occur during his lifetime. According to God, the testimony of such men is deadly, especially when it is hailed by religion as scripture. The message is in the names. But it was entirely forfeited by the religious community who reduced the passage to, the vision of Isaiah the son of Amoz, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. It is a travesty that names like Yahowah have been changed by men to the likes of Isaiah, removing Yahowah's name and mission from his testimony. Yahowah, freedom and salvation are from Yahowah as a compound of Yasha, to save, liberate, deliver, and free, and Yahowah. It reveals something vital, the very essence of what God is offering. But all of this is lost, 307 literally tossed aside, by those who don't want you to know that Yahowah is God and that He alone saves. Speaking of reputations, the rabbinical Masoretes disassociated Yahweh's name from Yahowah's. We have proof because the great Isaiah scroll serves as a witness to every letter of every word the prophet wrote. In an effort to roll back the consequence of religious malfeasance, we must look to Hebrew words which feature ZQ, as the zayin and kof are sandwiched between a pair of yas. We find that zak is to call or cry out and zakap is to lift up. Therefore, Yahweh conveys call out to Yah and Yah will lift you up. In this opening statement, we learn that Yahweh, salvation and freedom are from Yahowah via the Ben, son of Amotes, the trustworthy and steadfast. This presentation is Asher, regarding the beneficial relationship between Chazown, written prophecy and Yerushalayim, the source from which teaching and guidance regarding reconciliation flow. The Son would confirm and uphold the account Yahowah established in his Torah and through his prophets, affirming that he and they were trustworthy, supportive, and steadfast, and thus unchanging. While we are addressing religious corruption, you'll notice the scope of Yahweh's predictions, Yahweh and Yerushalayim. Period. So, while it might be a stretch to say that the rest of the world was not of interest to him, it certainly wasn't his focus. Yahowah initiated his covenant relationship in this place, and in the end, he will renew it here. This realization eliminates any possibility of a Roman Catholic Church, of Mecca and Islam, and of America and Mormonism. There is no place for replacement theology. The Church did not replace Israel. 308 We are going to review a half-dozen references to the Torah in what is unarguably the greatest prophetic book ever written. But in each case, as is our custom, we will first gain our bearings by coming to appreciate the context of the predictions. Listen, Shama, hear the message, spiritual realm, Shamaim, abode of God, heavenly and spiritual place, and, Wah, choose of your own accord to pay attention and respond, Arjan, elect to hear and perceive, of your own free will listen to the communication and reply, hyphal imperative, the message from Yahowah causes those listening to understand and respond should they choose to do so, material realm, eres, land, from an unused root meaning to be firm, typically addressing Israel, because, ky, indeed for the reason. Yahowah, the proper pronunciation of the name of Yahuwah, our Eloah, God as directed in his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence and our Shalom, restoration, has spoken, Dabar, communicated using words, Peel perfect, I reared my children, lifting them up, helping them grow, and enabling them to be great, Gadol Benim, I cared for my children, reaching down to lift them up, nurturing and enriching my sons. Honoring and empowering my family, promoting and magnifying them, making them important, Peel perfect, the children were enabled by Yah's actions at a moment in time, and, Wah, I raised them, taking them to a higher place, Room, I took them on high, increasing their capabilities and status, supporting them with everything necessary to keep them safe, providing them with added aptitudes, competencies, and proficiencies while magnifying their dimensionality, Peel perfect, but they, Wahem, have actually rebelled against me, Pasha Bar Eni, they have revolted against me and are openly defiant, having stepped away, they have transgressed our agreement, and in so doing they have offended me, making me angry, even indignant, because they have conspired to act in an 309 organized fashion in direct opposition to my authority, Cal perfect, while the rebellion is genuine, this revolt will come to an end. Yashar, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:2. The Haredi are specifically targeted by this assessment. They, like the Christians, have openly rebelled against Yahowah, even to the point of banning his name, but Jews alone were once God's children and have now denied the Father's role in their lives. And let's be clear, Yahowah has presented himself in his preferred role, a father raising his children. However, while Judaism is condemned in Yeshaya's second statement, Christianity and Islam have already been excluded. Yeshaya is addressing Yahweh and is speaking to the children of Israel. They alone were raised by God. Further, the entirety of the Christian New Testament, the Talmud, Zohar, and Quran are delegitimized by this statement because, unlike here in Yeshaya and throughout Yahowah's Hebrew prophets, in the religious text God is never seen speaking in first person or in his name. Since this is the proven and correct way to speak for Yahowah, the impostors are invalidated by their failure to replicate this result. Moving on to the meat of the message, our Heavenly Father is in the child-rearing business. He reached out to the children of Israel, lifted them out of human bondage, and enriched them with his presence and his Torah. But as is the case with far too many children, they ultimately rebelled against him. And since this is a blanket indictment, it isn't something which was done independently but, instead, collectively. And therefore, this is an indictment against religion. Underscoring this reality, Pasha carries two relevant connotations, the first of which addresses overt defiance, 310 Revolt, and rebellion. In this regard, the children of Israel transgressed against the covenant by failing to uphold the terms and conditions, and as such, for a time, they have forfeited their relationship with God. Then secondarily, as a result of substituting their religion in place of this intended association, they marched off in a different direction. They went back to Babylon with their Talmud. Before we move on, there is a Christian myth promoted by Paul which claims that while God originally formed his covenant relationship with Jews, since they allegedly schemed to kill Jesus, God turned his affections toward the Gentiles who actually crucified the Passover lamb. Notwithstanding the utter insanity of this absurdity, Paul opined that every promise God had made to Israel was thereupon transferred to his church. The fact God says no such thing was irrelevant to the myth. Even worse for the credibility of Christendom, based upon these first two verses, their scenario is impossible. The schism between Yathowr and Israel already existed way back in the day of Yashar in 770 BCE, such that the alleged substitution of Gentiles for Jews could not have been the result of what occurred in 33 CE. Moreover, as we press deeper into Yashar's prophetic testimony, we will find Yathowr reuniting with his people and reconciling his relationship with Yahweh and Israel. This next statement speaks of a cow and of an ass, associating both with Israel and Yahweh. God is so upset with their religious rebellion, he is affording these animals with more sense than his estranged children. A cow, shower, a bull or oxen, from Shah, one who looks, sees what is around him, and views the world from the proper perspective, who pays attention and is perceptive, is aware of and recognizes, Yada, knows and respects, is familiar with and acknowledges, is acquainted with and appreciates, the one who gave him 311 birth, Kanahu, his creator, the one who brought him forth as a baby, even the one who acquired him, paying a price to purchase him, and, an ass, chamor, a donkey. A stubborn domestic beast of burden, akin to chamots, lowly and impoverished people who are oppressed, hamates, the leavened, embittered, and subjugated, and shamar, the violent and cruel who are wrong and unjust, his Lord, Baal, master, owner and possessor, one who controls and rules over. Note, the feminine of Baal, Bala, is a mistress, sorceress, and necromancer. Israel, individuals who engage and endure with God or individuals who struggle and fight with God, the Wa. But prior to Israel found in the Masoretic text and English translations does not appear in DSS 1 Kesser, does not know and remains unaware, lo Yada, shows no respect, is unfamiliar, fails to acknowledge, is unacquainted, lacking appreciation, remaining unperceptive at this time, Cal perfect. And my people, wa eniam, my family, this is the beginning of a new sentence with a wa in 1 Kesser, have failed to consider this connection and thus do not understand, lo bin, they cannot comprehend the instruction, failing to discern the relationship between these things, and therefore they are not perceptive, showing a lack of judgment. Note, bin as a preposition is defined by the relative positions of things and their proximity and relationship, hit pale. The subject acts upon and with respect to itself to bring about the state or condition of the verb while the perfect, reveals that this condition will not last forever. Yashar, salvation is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:3. Shower, cow, is a loaded term, especially when paired with Kana, creator. While it addresses an animal known to be easily led and controlled, even slaughtered, the juxtaposition suggests that those who pay attention and 312 are observant, viewing the world from the proper perspective, will actually recognize Yahowah as their creator. Chamor, ass, is similarly revealing, especially when combined with Baal, Lord as it is in this case. An ass is an unappealing animal, which is why ass and donkey are used as pejoratives. It depicts stubborn beasts of burden which are often found braying, biting, spitting, and kicking those who are trying to lead them. And yet, these asses find their soulmate in Baal, the Lord, aka, Satan. Their allegiance to their Lord is what causes them to be chamor, a class of lowly, oppressed, and impoverished people, embittered by the cruel and unjust treatment which they have endured as a result of Baal, being owned and controlled by their master. Baal is the name and title Yahowah uses the most frequently to depict the adversary, Satan. He does so because, unlike God, Satan wants to be in control, to lord over mankind, to be feared and to be worshipped, possessing and owning human souls. Of all of the names and titles religions could have chosen to replace Yahowah, Lord is the worst possible option. It not only positions Satan as the god of religion, it serves to deceive the unwary into believing that God wants to control human lives and to be worshipped, when the opposite is true. It also gives credence to the popular religious fallacy that we all worship the same God. While it's true that Satan is the lord of every religion, the adversary most certainly is not God. And should you be offended by the realization that Satan is the object of worship in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, then I direct your attention to the Babel, Confusion chapter of Volume 4 of Observations, to Questioning Paul, and to Prophet of Doom. This is one of many occasions where our definition of Yisrael needs to be expansive. Most often, we can 313 translate it as individuals who engage and endure with God, in that it is a composition of Ish, individuals who Sarah, participate with and are sustained by, El, the Almighty. But Sarah can also mean to struggle, fight, and wrestle with God, providing an entirely different attitude, which is clearly the case in this context. Yada is a marvelous word, especially when it is addressing Yahowah. It means to know in the sense of recognizing someone, acknowledging their existence and presence, being familiar and acquainted with them, appreciating them for who they actually are, even respecting them. But Yisrael had become lo Yada, oblivious to Yahowah. And for this sorry state, for being lo Yada, we have Judaism to blame. Rather than lead Yisrael back to a relationship with Yahowah, the religion exists to replace Yahowah with the names of countless rabbis. Along with Yada, bin, comprehend ranks at the top of my list of favorite Hebrew words. Bin explains the process of going beyond an awareness of the facts to understanding them. This is accomplished by bin, making connections and discerning the relationships between things. It is how we learn and how we think. By combining these terms, we appreciate how Yahowah can be recognized and known, and how his offer to us can be understood. For a time, a very long time, Israel has forfeited the roles of being God's children and of living as the chosen people, giving up their privileged position by being as religious as the Gawi. It was not their brightest decision. Woe to, Howie, alas, this stern warning to those in serious trouble, an errant, blameworthy, and lost, chatter, a grievously wrong and guilty, an erring by completely missing the way, a failed and bereaved, faulty and offensive, nation of estranged people, Gawi, a 314 population who are not yathowm, related to God, acting like pagans and heathens, from Gower, to arrogantly lift up that which is backward and left behind, akin to Gola, exiles and captives, those who are deported from the land and vanquished. Severely stubborn and heavily laden, dulled and unresponsive, kabed, difficult and broken, discouraged and disheartened, with wrongdoing and the resulting guilt associated with perverted distortions, A1, with being corrupted from twisting and perverting the truth, being wrong and mistaken, the offspring, Zerah, the descendants and seed, of troublesome and loudmouthed, Ra, of errant, miserable, and displeasing. Noxious and injurious, children, Benim, who corrupt and destroy, Shaphat, who ravage and ruin, and are themselves caught in a putrid slime pit, captives in a dark dungeon, immoral, lacking integrity, hyphal participle. They have rejected and abandoned, Azab, they have deserted and forsaken, neglected and left, letting go of, Kal perfect, Yahowah, Yahowah, an accurate transliteration of the name Yahowah, our Eloah, God as guided by his Torah, instructions regarding his higher, existence and our Shalom, reconciliation. They have come to despise and they revile, Nats, they actually feel contempt for, strongly disliking while objecting to, they have spurned while blaspheming, they have rejected as having little or no value, from the masculine of Nazar, to shame and dishonor with contemptible words, to show disdain by insulting and slandering, to hold in disrepute and to abhor, provoke, and deride, Peel perfect, the object suffers the effect of the verb for a finite period of time as a result of their actions. The set apart one, Eth Kadosh, the uniquely devoted and completely separate and distinct one, from Kadash, to be set apart, prepared and dedicated, honorable and 315 sacrosanct, of Yisrael, Yisrael, individuals who engage and endure with God. They have become strangers, alienating themselves, Zur, they have gone astray, having severed the relationship, they are in full rebellion, having sullied and broken the agreement, Nephil perfect passive, having gone in the wrong direction, Akor, backsliding in full retreat, losing progress by heading in the wrong direction. Yashaya, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:4. This has been a devastating assault on Yisrael's credibility. If he were not the Shem, name, and if he were not Zardak, right, Jews would likely discount this scathing rebuke by insisting it was from an anti-Semite. Indeed, if anyone other than Yahowah said this of Jews, they would be labeled a bigot and summarily rebuked. So, what does this say about Jews coming as it does from God Almighty? And what Jewish institution, other than Judaism, would deserve such a blanket indictment? The fact is, there are only two institutions capable of having this kind of widespread and counterproductive influence over an entire country, and in most cases, they are intertwined, religion and government, as they are to this day in Israel. And yet, in the arena of human affairs, only one of these institutions is capable of leading an entire society away from God, leaving us with religion as the lone potential culprit. Therefore, Judaism has earned a dreaded Howie, woe from Yahowah and a degrading rebuke. With the use of gawi, we know that Israel was adversely influenced by the surrounding Gentile nations, to the point that they had come to resemble them. This suggests that religion, like any other plague, is contagious. It also means that the religions preferred by Gawim, such as Christianity and Islam, are chatter, errant and 316 grievously wrong, blameworthy for having missed the way. Rather than providing a cure for sin, religion is the source of sin, guilty of bereaving believers by deliberately misleading them. Since Yahowah limits his criticisms to individuals and institutions which interact with and influence his people, and since God's pronouncements remain true throughout time, he could be addressing the religions which grew out of Babylon, and came to influence Egypt, Persia, Greece, and Rome. And more recently, he would be criticizing Christianity and Islam, in addition to socialist secular humanism whereby progressives have turned against Israel with a vengeance. Each of these misguided human institutions and belief systems was conceived and perpetrated by A1, perverting and distorting the truth. In spite of how obviously errant their claims are, the bigger the lie, the more believable they became. They would grow so preposterous that, with Christianity, man killed their God. With Islam, man kills for their God. And with progressives, man, woman, it, is a God. These wayward children were kabed, difficult and broken, severely stubborn, dulled and unresponsive. And while that's bad, with A1, Yahowah is declaring Israel wrong. Their A1, perverted religious distortions have twisted and perverted the truth to the extent the people have been corrupted in the process. By including Ra, troublesome and loud-mouthed in this mix of pejoratives, Jews have yet another problem. Ra is indistinguishable from Ra, and it speaks of fellow countrymen and neighbors. In other words, the Ra, errant, miserable, and displeasing, noxious and injurious, curse has been internalized and it has metastasized. The children of Israel have gone from being raised by Yahowah to being condemned by him. They find 317 themselves shachet, ravaged and ruined, caught in a putrid slime pit as captives, having become immoral, lacking integrity. Such is true even today with rabbis, the very cause of this virus. Speaking of Israel's religious leaders, today's rabbis, Yahowah is saying that they have actually descended to the point that they hold him in contempt. And there is no question that they have come to despise and revile his name, preferring to cite their names instead as they are recorded in their Talmud. The rabbis with their religion are insulting God, and have provoked him to anger such that, for there to be healing, he had to deride them in this manner. Fortunately, there is a cure, a day of reconciliations for the Zur, strangers who have alienated themselves. The rebellion will be squelched, the sullied will be cleansed, and the broken agreement will be restored. Having gone in the wrong direction, they will soon be headed back home. But more than anything, had they listened to had they been observant, closely examining and carefully considering what he had to say in his Torah, they would have realized that, by accepting the religion of the Gawi, they were azab, rejecting any possibility of having a relationship with God. In all of the Hebrew lexicons, there is no word worse than azab, to abandon, desert, forsake, neglect, and let go of Yahowah. Before we delve into the next statement, let's make sure we have an eye for the big picture. We have left the poetry of the Psalms and entered the prose of the prophets, so it is especially easy to lose our bearings. The banter no longer rolls off the tongue like the lyrics of a song. This is serious business, God's business. And he is not happy with his people. 318 As we turn the page from Daud's joyous love song to the Torah, to Yeshaya's prophetic announcements about the consequence of ignoring it, we are hearing an entirely different tune. This is God's reaction to us being off-key, singing a chorus of sour notes, while blasphemous lyrics leave our lips. To drive this point home using words which are more familiar to Jews, the Gawim are perceived as a lesser species, a lower, less civilized form of life. They are unclean, ignorant pagans. We are not talking about oil and water here, because they are both liquids. And while they are immiscible, they will at least make contact and touch one another. A Jew's most boastful claim is that they are not like the Gentiles. And that is precisely what God had just called them because they had become indistinguishable. Christianity, like Judaism, contains morsels of truth. The problem is that so much of Yah's testimony is ignored and misconstrued in Christendom, and then so many pagan myths have been mixed in, that the end result is vastly more poisonous than nourishing. Even Islam can boast that some of what the Quran says is credible because much of it was purchased from rabbis and then twisted to Muhammad's liking. It is sad, but true, that mankind's most popular religions have Jewish origins. Judaism as it is practiced today is the bastardized product of Rabbis Akiba, Maimonides, and Baal Shem Tov, all Jews. Christianity was created by Paul, another Jewish rabbi. With Islam, The Quran and Hadith affirm that Muhammad paid Jewish rabbis in Yathrib to recite portions of their Babylonian Talmud, which he then plagiarized and corrupted to serve his agenda. That is why the Hebrew Bible and Quran share so many characters in common. Even socialist secular humanism was initiated by Adam Weishaupt's order of the Illuminati, another Jew. 319 And with communism, Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin were both Jewish. If ever a race of people were responsible for massive corruption with severe consequences, yathowm, turned Jews and acting like Gentiles, fit the bill. It would be accurate to say that God is neither politically correct, multicultural, nor tolerant. For what reason, Almar, on whose account, on what grounds, and why is it, do you want to be continually afflicted and destroyed, Naka? Do you consistently choose to be treated adversely and ravaged, to be stricken and defeated, becoming lame and crippled, conquered and subjugated, scourged and slaughtered, Hoffel imperfect cursive passive, the subject causes the object of the verb to engage in destructive behavior on an ongoing basis even as they are willing participants, over and over again, ode. Repeatedly and repetitiously, beyond reason, associating with and adding to, yazaf, joining others once again to habitually increase, hyphal imperfect active, your obstinate and hostile rebellion, Sarah, your offensive propensity to be evil, stubbornly wrong, criminally false, withdrawing and turning aside. The entire head, Shol Rosh, everything associated with the head, from eyes and ears to the mouth and brain, is afflicted with disease, La Choli, is sick and impaired, grievously evil, horribly wounded, injured as a result of a blow, from Shala, weak and incapacitated, in a sorry state, incapable of functioning properly. The entire heart, and thus the ability to exercise good judgment, Washel Labe, everything associated with the capacity to properly evaluate evidence and form rational and reasonable conclusions, the faculty of incorporating and internalizing what is learned to adroitly influence one's perspectives, attitudes, and ambitions, is cramped up and infirmed, Darway, is ill, faint, afflicted, 320 and injured, suffering menstrual cramps, debilitated and disabled. Yashayahu, salvation is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:5. For Yahowah to continue to issue this blanket indictment, almost everyone was affected. And that is an extremely important realization. It is commonly believed that the popularity of a religion serves to affirm its authenticity. As a result, Yahowah's message is often dismissed by unthinking religious individuals with a thoughtless, there is no way a lone voice can be right and everyone else be wrong. And yet, that was the case with Yashar being right and all of Israel being wrong. It is still the case today. The affected have no one but themselves to blame. They have brought this deadly and debilitating plague upon themselves. Anyone who is willing to do the research and think for themselves will come to recognize religion as false and unreliable. All one has to do is follow the evidence and go where the words lead. I'm not a descendant of Jacob, so Hebrew was not my native tongue. And I'm not the brightest person to have sought Yahowah, and yet, following this advice, I was able to go from where they are, political and religious, to here with Yashar, sharing his revelations with you. Unfortunately for most, religion protects itself by acknowledging that it is based on faith, using circular reasoning, that is unknowable and untestable and, thus, unverifiable. Devotees do not realize that just because their God is unknowable, their faith untestable, and their claims unverifiable, it does not mean that the actual God is limited in these ways. The fact is, he can be known. His testimony can be tested. And his claims can be verified. Then, by recognizing that he is trustworthy, religious faiths are invalidated. 321 God is asking a question. And I think he genuinely wants to know the answer. Given the choice between being continually afflicted by mankind's religious and political schemes, and dying as a result, or being freed from human oppression, engaging in a relationship with God and living forever, why do 99.9999% of people choose religion over relationship, subjugation over freedom, affliction over mercy, death over eternal life? It is a reasonable question without a rational answer. To be religious is, therefore, irrational. In the case of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and socialist secular humanism Shol Rosh La Choli, everything associated with one's head, from their eyes and ears to their mouth and brain, is diseased and impaired, incapacitated and inept. The Choli lack the capacity to think, to exercise good judgment, and to know right from wrong. Their ability to evaluate evidence and form rational and reasonable conclusions is Darway, cramped up and infirmed, suffering menstrual cramps, debilitated and disabled. So, therefore, the malady which led to Israel's meltdown was holy menses, disabling and debilitating the people's capacity to exercise good judgment. They were suffering from brain spasms. Today, this condition is an epidemic even in secular circles. The infectious disease, spread by the progressives, is stupefying the masses. It is as invalid and irrational as political correctness, the replacement moral code in which being discerning and discriminating are an anathema, where lies become acceptable and the truth is always objectionable. And yet, this is the religion of Western democracies, collectively debilitating almost everyone's ability to evaluate evidence and render rational and reasonable conclusions. In its every form and manifestation, religion causes its victims to turn away and withdraw from God while being stubborn and obstinate in the process. Not once in 10,322 exchanges with religious individuals have I witnessed a single believer respond to evidence and reason even in the face of undeniable facts and irrefutable logic. Faith will not consider that which is opposed to it, even when the opposition comes from God Himself. Religion eats away at a person's mind and heart until both are diseased and crippled, becoming useless. It is a disease that even God cannot cure because it renders its victims unwilling to consider, much less ingest, the antidote. The victims of this disease are so smitten with it that they have no interest in a cure. It is a deadly and diabolical foe. From the sole of the foot, min kaf regel, or from the palm of the hand to the bottom of the foot, and all the way up to the top of the head, wa and rosh, there is nothing in it, ein bar hu, that is healthy or sound, metam, that has any integrity, that is free of damage or decay, from tamam, that is unimpaired or right, that hasn't been destroyed. Emasculated and castrated, patsa, wounded, slashed, battered, and bruised, wa shabura, beaten and stricken, from Cheba, in association with spellbinding charmers and in league with enchanters and magicians, with wounds associated with a devastating and deadly plague, makar, with the mark and stigma of disastrous and incapacitating attacks, leaving the body physically impaired, from naka, being scourged and subjugated, smitten and slain, which are raw and rotten, tari, that are oozing and open, fresh and putrefying, inflamed and infected, they have not been cleansed, lo zur, they remain unwashed, filled with foreign dirt and debris that has not been squeezed out, causing alienation and estrangement, kal perfect. They have not accepted any prescriptions, treatment, nor remedy, nor have they been medicated 323 and bandaged, while lo chabash, nor have they been remedied, wrapped up and covered, nor healed by a physician, not even soothed, while lo rakok, nor responded to, quelled nor mollified, so as to relieve the physical injury and pain by softening the rebellious nature, with the oil of the olive, bar ha-sheman, by the extracted ointment of the olive serving as an anointing medication to promote healing. Yashea, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:6. That is not an appealing picture. Since their souls had been ruined by religion, there was nothing to salvage, no hope for a cure. The damage would span generations, even millennia. A careful and complete examination of the linguistic possibilities which emerge from the letters upon which the words of this divine admonishment were comprised yields a myriad of intriguing possibilities which I'd like to share. The better you understand the process, and the more familiar you are with the options, the more independent you will become in your quest to know Yah. To begin, if I had rendered the opening phrase, min kaf regal ad rosh, from the palm of the hands to the bottom of the feet, all the way up to the head, it would have more inclusively demonstrated that every aspect of our deeds, our walk, and our thoughts have become metam, corrupted. We were given this latitude because kaf is equally comfortable conveying palm of the hand or sole of the feet. Further, patsa, shabura, and makar can all be translated, wound. In fact, if we are to believe the Masoretic diacritical markings, this is nothing more than a string of 3 nouns following a succession of 4 nouns, each peppered with prepositions and conjunctions but without the benefit of a single verb. Therefore, based upon the rabbinical vocalization, the opening text reads, from 324 soul foot and until head not in him health wound and wound fresh. They would have us believe that the first verb was zur, which was negated to tell us that they do not wash or wring out the fluid from an open wound, so as to remove the filth or infection. Although to be fair, by negating makar with ein, we get is not sound and thus transform the negated noun into the equivalent of a verb. Surprisingly, it does not take much effort to find uniqueness and action among the terms which were actually conveyed. For example, the verb and noun forms of patsa are scribed identically, giving us the opportunity to translate it as crushed, battered, and bruised, stricken, castrated, and emasculated in this diatribe exposing the consequence of religious corruption. Similarly, a modicum of investigation reveals that shabura is from chabar, indicating that, rather than being a nondescript injury, we find religion uniting people and binding a society together in a spellbinding fellowship, charming them into participating in a pledge predicated upon occultism and magic spells. This is particularly relevant considering the dominant influence of Kabbalah mysticism, indeed occult spiritualism, in Rabbinic Judaism. It all began with Maimonides, the father of the Jewish religion as it is practiced today. Progressing on to makar, we find another noun whose primary definition is wound. But that is just on the surface because, when we dig just a bit deeper, we unearth the realization that Makar also describes the consequence of religion, suggesting that it is so contagious that it quickly envelops an entire society. And that is because Makar speaks of a devastating and deadly plague, a pandemic disease which infects and ravages an entire population, conquering and slaughtering nations. It is from Naka, a verb which denotes subjugating, striking, smiting, scourging, and slaying, even applauding, possessing, punishing, and perishing. 325 Anything this contagious, this infectious, is of course a Towrah, raw and open wound, an inflamed and filthy infected lesion. But should you prefer a shallower approach, you could limit Towrah to fresh or moist and thereby miss its contribution to the pandemic plague of Judaism, and how it metastasized into Christianity, Islam, Haredi, and then communism. In this context, the principal meaning of lo zoar is barely sufficient. It simply says that the inflamed and open wound remains filthy because it has not been cleansed. The pus of religious platitudes is still oozing out, because no one has bothered to wring out the offensive contagion. But further elucidating Yes' criticism, we find that Zohar describes the particular type of infection which is now killing God's children, the loathsome harlotry of foreign and adversarial ways which leads to total estrangement and irreversible alienation. As the first actual verb in the indictment, Zohar was written using the truly kal passive. It is a stem so fraught with meaning the Masoretes didn't even recognize what it represented. The truly kal is first and foremost the voice of reality, telling us that, while using symbolic language, this condition is real. Moreover, its effect on the populace is a result of passivity. It, therefore, isn't so much that they chose not to be cleansed, or that they were opposed to having the rabbinical ooze removed from their systems, but that they were so apathetic, they didn't bother to seek a remedy. And there may be no better explanation of how religion corrupts an entire society than this. Far too few people have the courage and character to endure the criticisms which are hurled at those who dare speak out against religion on behalf of Yahowah's testimony. So, the contagion spreads unabated. Also noteworthy, Zohar featured the perfect conjugation. And that means these human afflictions went totally unwashed for a period of time. The estrangement 326 was complete, and for a while, the alienation was irreversible. This then only brings us to the halfway point of this extraordinary passage. So now, in our quest to appreciate Yahowah's prophetic denunciation of the Jewish religion, we must confront lo shabash which, scribed in the third person plural, was translated as they have not accepted any prescriptions, treatment, nor remedy, nor have they been medicated and bandaged. Written using the Paul stem, which is the passive form of the peel, we come to realize that the victims of religion are suffering because they have not bothered to even consider God's prescriptions, much less nourish their souls on His Torah, which is the only antidote. So, they are neither healed nor restrained from their deadly delusions. As we approach Yahowah's closing pronouncement, we find a host of potential meanings associated with shaman, shaman depending on how vowel points are added to the consonants. Striving to make the best choice, we must consider whether God meant to say olive oil, richness, fat, putting on weight, eating an inappropriate diet, being bloated, becoming slimy, leading an easy life, being rich and living surrounded by abundance, being calloused, being unresponsive, being incapacitated, or lacking understanding. Some of these things have been implied in the midst of this overt condemnation of all things religious, so several connotations interfit. And while I elected to render the compound phrase, Baha Sheman with the oil of the olive, I could just as easily have published it as in their calloused, fat, bloated, and incapacitated state. Also possible, I could have rendered it as in their slimy and unresponsive ways, with their wholly inappropriate diet, and in their riches and abundance, and because of their lack of understanding. Then they have not been the least bit receptive or responsive. 327 This conclusion was provided by Wallo Rakok, so they have allowed themselves to become totally hardened and inflexible, stubborn and recalcitrant, totally resistant and completely impervious. Also scribed using the Paul perfect, they have allowed themselves to become unreceptive because they haven't even bothered to respond to Yah's guidance. His Torah, teaching, his Barith, covenant opportunity, his Mikrei, invitations, and his offer of Kippurim, reconciliations were not of any interest to them. Therefore, these Jews were acting a lot like the Christians who have been poisoned by Pauline doctrine. And therein lies the value of due diligence. While we cannot be certain that Yahowah expected us to include all of these criticisms in his indictment, we now realize that many, if not most, of these observations were intended. Or we could dispense with all of the anti-religious rhetoric and rely on the King James Version, believing the Lord saith. From the sole of the foot even unto the head there is no soundness in it, but wounds, and bruises and putrefying sores, they have not been closed, neither bound up, neither mollified with ointment. But alas, as I have suggested before, let's not be unfair. The King James Version was, after all, nothing more than a politically inspired revision of the Geneva Bible, and that religious tome, by its own admission, only served to update the bishop's Bible, which was a revision 2 times over of John Wycliffe's translation of the Latin Vulgate. It, in turn, was a translation of the Septuagint, itself a translation of the Hebrew text. So, since the KJV was filtered through 5 revisions and 4 languages, we shouldn't expect accuracy. Further exacerbating the problem, by the time Jerome began his translation on behalf of the Vatican, the Septuagint had been corrupted to the point it was unreliable, and with respect to the creation of the King 328 James version, the only credible manuscript of the Masoretic text, the Codex Leningradensis, would not be published for 200 years. So even if they had deployed Hebrew scholars, which they didn't, it wouldn't have mattered. Furthermore, the great Isaiah scroll, from which this translation was derived, wouldn't be found for another 3 centuries. Moreover, the Christian New Testament, for which it was conceived, is far more wrong than right. Therefore, the King James Version isn't, as it claims, the authorized Word of God. Moving on, we discover that the choice between religion and relationship is not without consequences. Therefore, speaking prophetically of what Yahowah had shown him would happen to Israel as a result of the curse they had brought upon themselves, Yahshua reported, "Your land, Eres Atom, your realm and country, will become lifeless and ruined, Shemomah, will be desolate and deserted, sparsely populated and clothed in despair, ravaged and abandoned, destitute and destroyed, an appalling horror. Your cities and towns, Ir Atom, your walled encampments and villages, especially your shrines and temples, will be consumed by fire, Sarofesh, will be burned by the serpent's flames of flashing light. Your soil, Odama Atom, your ground, before you and conspicuously in your presence, La-Nejd Atom, in proximity to you, will be devoured and destroyed, Akal-Eth, by illegitimate, unauthorized, and foreign foes, Zar, alien strangers from a distant place who are loathsome and nauseating whores, from Zur, strange and estranged adversarial harlots. They will bring woe, they will come, advancing, from one Kesser, devastating perversity and adversarial transformations, Mapika, changing everything in a destructive manner, from one Kesser, similar to, Ka, like, 329 being overthrown and demolished, Mapika, being perversely transformed and adversely changed, thereby destroyed, by loathsome and nauseating whores, Zar, illegitimate, unauthorized, and foreign foes, alien strangers from a distant place who are estranged adversarial harlots. Yahshua, salvation is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:7. We must be careful because, in English, our verbs convey time, and we must choose to convey some variation of the past, present, or future action. That is not the case with Hebrew. That said, I chose the future tense knowing that it would be another 20 years before the northern kingdom would be set ablaze by the Assyrians. Beyond this, since Yahowah is also addressing Yerushalayim, it would be a century and a half before the Babylonians would destroy the capital of Yahweh around 595 BCE. Yahweh's most unrelenting, formidable, and vicious foe was Rome. They would not strike at the heart of the land for another 600 to 800 years, doing so 3 times, first in 65 BCE, then in 70 CE, and finally in 133 CE. Later, when Imperial Rome evolved into the Roman Catholic Church under Theodosius in 381 CE, they would continue to occupy the Promised Land and terrorize Jews through 636 CE, when Islamic jihadists, the most illegitimate of foreign foes, overthrew them and seized Jerusalem. This prophecy was precisely fulfilled between 133 and 135 CE when, after failing to recognize Daud as the Passover lamb, rebellious and religious Jews at the urging of Akiba professed that Simon bar Kokhba, son of a star, was the prophesied Messiah. His revolt against Rome turned out poorly. Jews were exiled from the land as foreigners rushed in. Their cities and towns were burned to the ground while the earth in the vicinity of Yerushalayim was salted and overturned, converting the lush land into a devastated and desolate wilderness where almost no one 330 lived for centuries. And when those who had no legitimacy in the land claimed it for themselves, Muslims built the most appalling desecration upon the Temple Mount, Allah's Dome of the Rock. These things considered, the line preserved by the great Isaiah scroll from Qumran is potentially telling because Christians brought Mapika, devastating perversity and adversarial transformations by way of their replacement theology. It is one of many reasons Yahowah associates Christendom with the whore of Babylon. In all of man's endeavors, there has never been a case like Israel, a nation which continues to endure even after being conquered by the likes of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, Imperial Rome, the Roman Catholic Church, the first Muslims, the Ottomans, and the British. Throughout it all, Yahowah has managed to keep Zion conspicuous, to retain an encampment for a remnant of watchmen. However, the daughter, Wabath, of Zion, the conspicuous signs posted to mark the way, Zion, Zion, the signposts providing directions along the way and the instructive markers on the path, will be preserved and left as a reminder, yathowr, will be spared as a remnant, maintained and left behind, from one kesser, like a sheltered place for living, sukkah, akin to a covered dwelling, comparable to a campsite, similar to a protected home or tabernacle. Note, sukkah is the name of the seventh and final mikra. In a vineyard, bar karem, where grapevines are planted, cultivated, dressed, tended, and harvested, like an overnight cottage for a watchman, malyuna, akin to a small and temporary enclosure to provide lodging for one who is on guard to dwell during the night, in a challenging garden filled with vehemently difficult stubble, mixture, in an ill-treated and harsh field worked hard to make cucumbers or melons grow, from Kaisha, 331 difficult and burdensome. And kashash, a challenging place with harsh conditions where crops are hard-pressed, filled with obstinate sticks, stiff stubble, and stubborn chaff, and then, and also, from one kesser, as an awakened encampment, ear, akin to a roused town or village where the inhabitants are on guard and alert, from a population stirred up, aroused, and awakened, which is preserved by being observant, nazar, which is spared, maintained, and protected, guarded and kept safe by watching carefully and paying attention, participle, literally and genuinely, demonstrably and tangibly spared. Yashaya, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:8. The King James Version sucks all of the life out of this message, and the daughter of Zion is left as a cottage in a vineyard, as a lodge in a garden of cucumbers, as a besieged city. Even worse, in their quest to advance replacement theology, the New Living Translation authored their own novel, Beautiful Jerusalem stands abandoned like a watchman's shelter in a vineyard, like a lean-to in a cucumber field after the harvest, like a helpless city under siege. Yashaya recorded this prophecy around 743 BCE, and for another 158 years, Yerushalayim would stand. Yahowah's home and their homes were left intact, all as a direct result of Hezekiah's courageous and resolute return to the Torah's instructions regarding Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. And that would make the NLT's improvisation wrong, should Christians actually care. Jerusalem has never been abandoned, and Yerushalayim, the source from which instruction and direction regarding reconciliation flow, has never been reduced to a lean-to in a cucumber field. While there were no Hebrew manuscripts or scholars available during the compilation of the KJV in 1611, the 90 Christian scholars composing the New Living 332 translation for Tyndale House Publishers between 1989 and 1996 are without excuse. They knew that Zion and Yerushalayim were different names with different meanings, and yet, they replaced one with the other. The point Yahowah is making here is that Yahweh, Jewish women would survive to produce yathowm, Jewish children, such that a remnant would survive. And also, the Zion signs he had posted along the way in Yerushalayim, the source of reconciliation, would be preserved to show that remnant the way home. It would be a struggle most would not endure, the land would not be readily receptive, and the watchmen would be few, and yet, they would be one, they would return to the land, it would blossom, and Israel would survive. The definitive Zion, Yahowah's Torah, Nabi, Mizmowr, has been preserved in the caves strategically located between Jerusalem and the Dead Sea. The crevasses in the rocks where the most important of the Zion signs posted along the way were preserved are less than 9 miles due east of the ridgeline of Zion, and are located within the base of the mountain which shares its identity with Moriah, Moriah. So yes, Yahowah's instructions on the way were yathowr, preserved as a reminder, left behind and spared, sukkah, like a sheltered encampment for living. The path to sukkah, to camping out with God and living with him in his home, known as the Mikra, is featured in the Torah scrolls found therein. They present the way home to the vineyard, to the place where the grapes of life are rooted and grow. A remnant of Yah's people would remain in the land. They would dwell through difficult times in a mixture, challenging garden filled with vehemently difficult stubble, where obstinate chaff and lifeless branches would one day be collected and tossed aside. And then, more 333 than 2 millennia later, there would be an awakening, a remnant who would once again camp out with Yahowah by Nazar, being observant. Unlike every other nation which has been conquered and destroyed, a remnant of Jews has remained so that their land could be repopulated, and more importantly, so that Yahowah could honor the promises he had made to their fathers. In spite of mankind's best efforts to annihilate his people and possess Israel, it is an independent nation and Jews are free to live within it once again. So now, as the world stews in a cauldron of religious, political, patriotic, and conspiratorial propaganda, becoming ever more like Sodom and Gomorrah with each passing day, we find God telling his people what he has done so that they might turn to him before it is too late. Unless, Lubal, if not for the contrasting affirmation of, Yahowah, the proper pronunciation of Yahuwah based upon his Torah, teaching regarding his higher, existence, of the host of spiritual messengers, Zaba, regiment of heavenly envoys deployed as implements, had not spared and preserved a remnant, yathowr, had not left a few and allowed them to remain as a reminder, on our behalf, la-eni, as a few come out, a diminished and relatively small amount of, survivors, sarid. A residual part left alive of what once was a much larger living population, then like, Kar, Sodom, Sodom, scorched and burning, a Canaanite city on the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea, we would have been, higher, we would have existed, Cal-perfect, and approaching, Amora, Gomorrah, a depressed habitation which dealt tyrannically and manipulated inappropriately to enslave. We would be likened and compared, Dama, we would be thought of and considered with a similar story, ceased and silenced for others to contemplate, Cal-perfect. Yashar, salvation is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:9. 334 The people of Sodom or Gomorrah are gone. Apart from what Yahowah has to say about their perversity, nothing is known, and no one survived. But that is not the case with Yisrael. In spite of the religious and political, and now the academic and progressive crusades to erase Yisrael's history so as to curtail the nation's legitimacy, miraculously, in a world resembling Sodom and Gomorrah, yathowm are back home in Yisrael. Since we have been mocking the NLT, they laughingly strayed from the truth with, if the Lord of Heaven's armies had not spared a few of us, we would have been wiped out like Sodom, destroyed like Gomorrah. Sadly, as we turn the page, we find Yahowah continuing to address Israel as if the nation had come to incorporate the religious and political perversions of the Goyim surrounding them, actually becoming like Sodom and Gomorrah. That is how far they had fallen. And yet, for some of them, there would be hope, a means to recover and be reconciled into the covenant. You will listen to the word, Shama Dabar, you will actually hear the commanding statements and pronouncements, Cal imperative active, presenting a literal imperative to listen to the written and verbal proclamations, of Yahowah, the proper pronunciation of the name of Yahuwah, our Eloah, God as directed in his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence and our Shalom, restoration, political and religious leaders, Katzin, governors and rulers, commanders and officers, magistrates and anyone else in a position of authority, from Katzah, to be cut off and scraped away, of Sodom, Sodom, scorched conflagration. And so, then, from one Kesser, you should choose of your own free will to intently hear, perceiving what is said, and then respond appropriately while benefiting. 335 from, Arjan, it is in your best interest to fully deploy your faculty of hearing to receive the report and understand it and then prudently reply as assisted by, hyphal imperative, the Torah, teaching, guidance, direction, and instruction, Torah, source from which useful information flows and enlightenment is imparted to students, of our God. Elohim and Aknu, people, family of related individuals, of Amora, Gomorrah, depressed habitation which deals tyrannically, and manipulates inappropriately to enslave. Yashar, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:10. The word of Yahowah is found in the 5 books which comprise the Torah, teaching, throughout the 20 Nabi, prophets, and in the Mizmowr, Psalms, which are inclusive of the Proverbs, the historical writings of the Judges, Chronicles, and Kings, in addition to books like Ruth and Job. From Yahowah's perspective, his every revelation includes Nabi, prophecy and Torah, teaching, making his word a singular collection seamlessly integrating his prophetic, past, present, and future, guidance. The Torah, like the scroll of the prophet Yashar, is well attested in the archives found in the caves surrounding the Dead Sea. Sections of 24 scrolls have been found of Bereshith, Genesis, 18 of Shemoth, Exodus, 16 of Kara, Leviticus, 11 of Bamidbar, Numbers, and 33 of Dabarim, Deuteronomy, all copied in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd centuries BC from much older texts. The only way to hear Yahowah today is precisely the same as it was for those listening in Israel 2,700 years ago. Nothing has changed. Nothing will change. So should you want to know God, recite his Torah, Nabi, wa Mizmowr. However, this does not suggest that the Katzin, political and religious leaders are going to come to their senses and embrace the word of God. They will hear him but not by choice. But more on that in a moment. 336 When this prophetic statement is corrected through the witness of the great Isaiah scroll, it reveals in no uncertain terms that even as mankind's collective morality and mentality tumble in the last days, approaching the decadence on display in Sodom and Gomorrah, there will be no distinction between the word of Yahowah, and the Torah of our God. To Shama, listen to one is to Arjan, hear, perceive, and respond to the other. This not only affirms that the Torah will remain in effect, but it also negates the intent of the Talmud and New Testament. Neither the physician nor his methods have changed. The consideration of Hebrew stems and moods is always relevant, but it becomes especially so when a similar verb is used to address 2 different audiences as Shama, listen, and Arjan, hear, perceive, and respond were in this case. When addressing the Chazown, political and religious leaders, Shama, listen was written using the Kal imperative. And then, when addressing the people living in the Gomorrah-like conditions of Israel, the hyphal imperative was selected to modify Arjan, hear, perceive, and respond. This difference in stems is significant and actually serves to shade our options regarding translating the imperative mood, which can either express a command or a desire. With the politicians and rabbis responsible for these Sodom-like conditions, this is an imperative. They are being told to actually listen, ordered and commanded if you will, to hear what the Creator of the universe has to say. And the implication is that they will be judged by Yahweh's words. However, by using the hyphal stem with the imperative mood rather than the Kal, the individuals comprising the remnant of Israel who choose under the auspices of free will to Arjan, hear, perceive, and respond to what the Torah reveals, will be assisted by the Torah, serving as understudies. With the hyphal stem, the subject, in this 337 case, the Torah, acts upon and engages the object, the people, such that they are able to respond effectively to the Torah's guidance. Therefore, while the world's religious and political leaders will be condemned, for the remnant of Israel during the last days, they will actually determine how the Torah will affect them based upon their response to it, with it saving them or condemning them. Further, regardless of how we present the nuances of Hebrew grammar, or whether an individual is a perpetrator or former devotee of religion, the instruction is clear: listen to the word of Yahowah and then respond to the Towrah of our God. Within this context of God expressing his frustration over the pervasive nature of religious corruption as a result of men convoluting and counterfeiting his Torah to the point that such institutions and rituals are now more irritating and indoctrinating than instructive and beneficial, God says he has had enough of such sacrifices. By what means can I be approached through, la, concerning the goal of moving toward me, what is the purpose of, the great multitude and exalted aspects, Rab, the great abundance and widespread use? Note, Rab is the basis of rabbi and rabbinic, of your sacrifices, Zeba Atom, your offerings from the religious perspective, the slaughtering of animals as an act of worship, expiation, or propitiation to a supposed deity. Asks, Amar, declares and queries, Kal imperfect, active, Yahowah, an accurate transliteration of the name Yahowah, our Eloah, God as guided by his Torah, instructions regarding his higher existence and our shalom, reconciliation. I will literally and actually fulfill, satisfy, and complete, Saba, I will genuinely, once and for all, honor my obligation to do as I have promised, and I will fulfill to 338 my complete and total satisfaction once and for all, Kal perfect active, the uplifting offerings to rise, Ola, that which rises up and ascends, from Allah, to ascend and go up, to grow and rise up, of the male lambs, rams, leaders of the flock, upright pillars that form the framework of the doorway. In addition, the lipid tissue, wa keleb. Furthermore, the fat of an animal which is unsuitable for eating and thus is burned up in the cooking fire, of overfed fatlings, Mary, relatively young weaned cattle, from Mara, is filthy and gross, and the blood of bulls, wa dampar, lambs, wa kibs, and goats wa achwad, I do not want or desire, lo chats, I take no pleasure in, Kal perfect active. Yashaya, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:11. Improperly translated, this may be among the most misleading statements in the prophets. The King James Version renders this opening salvo, to what purpose is the multitude of your sacrifices unto me? Saith the Lord, I am full of the burnt offerings of rams. From this the New Living Translation opined, what makes you think I want all your sacrifices? Says the Lord, I am sick of your burnt offerings of rams. Beyond the obvious fact that the Hebrew text does not support purpose, think, want, all, the Lord, full of, sick, burnt, or especially your burnt, the implication of these clerical publications is that we are free to disregard Yahowah's Passover instructions regarding the sacrificial lamb. One wouldn't even have to extrapolate as far as these translators did to imply that, since the Lord is full of the burnt offerings of rams and does not want all of our sacrifices, we are being encouraged to dispense with Passover altogether. And while we are at it, the irrational might assume that God would welcome the substitution of the Babylonian celebration of Easter and its ceremonial ham instead, especially if he was so sick of lamb. And since there are sacrificial animals associated with the 339 festival Feast of Shelters, why not avoid all the fuss and mess by observing something pagan, say Christmas for example? But is that what God is advocating? These errant Christian translations and subsequent assumptions are the product of a gross initial misunderstanding. Christians have been brainwashed into believing that the feasts, some of which include sacrificing an animal as part of the meal, are Jewish when, in actuality, the Mikrei are Yahowah's invitations. So, when God says that he cannot be approached through the great multitude of your sacrifices and offerings, he is speaking of Judaism's religious substitutions, of which there are many. Yahowah did not contradict himself to suggest that he could not be approached through his son's sacrifices on our behalf, namely Pesach and Matzah. Atom is your plural while any is my. The text reads atom, all of your not any, my sacrifices. Apart from the context of this overt prophetic condemnation of religious practices, there would be two ways to translate the operative verb in this startling revelation. Saba, which was scribed in the first-person singular cal perfect, was rendered as I will literally and actually fulfill, satisfy, and complete, because Saba means to satisfy, to be satisfied, to fulfill, and to be fulfilled. To satisfy and to fulfill are similar concepts, because by satisfying a debt or promise you have fulfilled your obligation. It is also appropriate to be satisfied as a result of following through on one's commitments. While the cal stem addresses that which is to be understood literally and actually, the perfect conjugation indicates that the fulfillment was or will be completed in a moment in time. In the perfect conjugation, the act of fulfilling and satisfying is total and complete, lacking and requiring nothing additional forevermore. However, the perfect conjugation does not indicate whether this has 340 already happened or when it will occur. Therefore, since we are now aware of the timing, God is saying I will actually fulfill the uplifting offering. Also, since Saba was not scribed in the imperfect conjugation, it cannot represent a continuously ongoing or unfolding condition. Therefore, the verb cannot be rendered to suggest that God has had his fill of sacrifices because this would represent a continuous perspective. Therefore, Saba cannot be translated as it is found in the JPS, KJV, or NLT. It is especially interesting to note that of the 97 times Saba appears in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, the positive implications of satisfying, being satisfied, fulfilling, and being fulfilled are consistently represented in English translations with the lone exception of this one verse. Only in Isaiah 1:11 is Saba turned into a negative concept to express I have had my fill, which implies I've had more than enough and can take no more. Even the first use of Saba in Exodus 16:8 implies that the children of Israel were Saba, satisfied with the provision of bread Yahowah gave them each morning. Therefore, both lexicons and the text itself dictate that Saba scribed in this way should be rendered, I have or will literally fulfill, and I have or will totally satisfy at some point in time. While Yahowah had not yet in 745 BC Saba completely satisfied or literally fulfilled the Torah promises he had made regarding Passover, unyeasted bread, firstborn children, and 7 Shabats, he and his son would do so 777 years later in 33 CE. Note, there was no year 0. Moreover, he would only fulfill them once, consistent with the use of the perfect conjugation. Therefore, God is encouraging religious individuals to question the merit of their sacrifices, suggesting that they are meaningless to him. Giving up chocolate for Lent and 341 meat on Fridays isn't going to impress God, nor is afflicting oneself while twirling a chicken overhead on the eve of Yom Kippur. But more than this, he is encouraging them to compare their sacrifices to what he has endured. He wants everyone to know that he has done everything necessary to save us. Nothing more needs to be accomplished. And then, by connecting these two thoughts, we should come to the realization that the best way to observe Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim is to celebrate the fact that Father and Son fulfilled the promise to save us by satisfying our debts. Central to understanding all of this is the awareness that Yahowah isn't stuck in time as we mortals are. He can speak of that which he will do as that which he has done. Even though at the time of this writing his fulfillments were 777 years in the future from the prophet's perspective, and nearly 2,000 years in the past from ours, God has seen and experienced all of it as if it were here and now. Moving deeper into the text of this prophetic declaration, be aware that Ola is only construed to be a burnt offering because the word is used in the context of an offering. It actually means to ascend, thereby acknowledging that our souls, like the smoke of a fire, will rise. So based upon, and indeed indistinguishable from, Allah, such an offering is symbolically seen as going up to meet and visit with God. And that is precisely what the sacrifice of the Lamb of God accomplished on Pesach, enabling us to live forever. Also relevant, as we complete this prophetic pronouncement, you will notice that there will be several words chosen to represent the various sacrifices. In addition to the ale, lamb, we will soon have murya, filthy animals, par, bulls, kibs, rams, and athud, goats. And since all but ale have decidedly negative connotations associated with them, we ought to appreciate that the Ola, elevating offering of the ale, 342 lamb was completely satisfied and literally fulfilled by God. The ale represents the sacrificial lamb, a leader among the flock, which is one of Yahowah's favorite metaphors. In this case, Dowd represents the frame of the doorway in connection with Passover. More specifically, the ale is the place where doorposts anchor to a home, and upon which the door swings open or closes. This then addresses how our response to Yahowah's and Dowd's fulfillment of these promises determines whether heaven's door is open or closed for us. Furthermore, Ale presents the sacrificial lamb as the source of robust health and vigor and, indeed, as the one who helps empower and strengthen. Then, to further underscore all of these metaphors associated with the sacrifices Father and Son made on our behalf, the Ale is the upright one who stood up for us so that we could be with them. And yet, even though all these insights are relevant, Yahowah was not finished. It was crucial that he reinforced the fact that his children are nourished by every part of the sacrificial animal which is good to eat and that only the fatty tissues and inedible portions are sacrificed, rising up to heaven. This further affirms the fact that God does not benefit from our sacrifices, even though we benefit from his. The religious notion that people curry favor with God through their sacrifices is repugnant. Not only are mankind's contributions worthless to him, but when we consider ours to be meritorious and deserving of some eternal reward, we actually display an arrogant and ignorant contempt for what Yahowah and Dowd have done. It would be like someone buying you the most magnificent home on the most beautiful property in the world and then you handing your benefactor 2 pennies 343 from your pocket as your contribution. All you would do is insult them and diminish the value of their gift. Also, keep in mind that this passage is prophetic because it speaks of how Yah's instructions regarding his 7 invitations would be, and now have been, corrupted to the point that in the lives of the religious they serve no purpose and are actually counterproductive. The religious approach to God is fundamentally flawed because man's way not only ignores God's way, it is in conflict with the approach Yahowah has stipulated. So, God asks the following question to those who believe that he is going to appreciate, and indulge the faithful who offer him something of no value to anyone. Because if, ky, instead and on the contrary, by way of this branding, hypothetically should, you strive to approach, bolah, you seek to arrive and be included by means of coming, kal imperfect, to see, ra, to look upon, to be shown, and to view, nephil infinitive construct passive, a verbal noun in which the subject carries out and receives the verb's action without any reference to place or time, my presence, pana any, who or what was it, my, that sought this beggary, bakosh joth. Who was responsible for requesting this pleading, who conspired to establish this supplicating petition, peel perfect, from your hand, min yod atom, as a result of your influence and actions. Thereby treading upon, la ramas, so as to trample, from one kesa, kal infinitive, an actionable concept which should be interpreted literally without any reference to place or time, the blowing of my trumpets in my court, chatsa any, my troubadours in my enclosure surrounded by curtains and walls within my courtyard when my trumpets are sounded, defined by its use in Numbers 10:1-3, 1 Chronicles 15:24, and Leviticus 6:9. Yashayahu, salvation is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:12. 344 The Almighty cannot be bribed. Heaven's doors are not opened with donations, large or small. Begging poverty will not prevail either. Pleading with him will fall on deaf ears. Passover alone opens the door to heaven. Unyeasted bread is the welcome mat provided at the threshold of God's to wipe our feet before entering. If we want to approach Yah, we must do so his way. God is asking those who would go to their local synagogue, temple, or church bearing gifts which had been solicited by the very clerics who personally benefited from them, why? What on earth causes religious devotees to believe that God has solicited, much less receives, or even wants anything they have to offer? And yet, the institutions which feast on such donations have flourished by beguiling the gullible into believing that by giving to the clerics they are earning God's favor. The religious, by breaching the covenant's conditions and ignoring Yahowah's invitations, have rejected God's gifts of eternal life, being perfected, adopted, enriched, and empowered. Nonetheless, they expect that he will accept their monetary offerings in exchange for their salvation. Good luck with that. Therefore, Yahowah is saying that by offering what he did not request, believers are making a mockery of those things which he has requested. He asked us to meet with him 7 times a year, with some of those days announced by the blast of a trumpet. And yet, not one person in a million does as he has instructed. Most prefer to respond as their religion dictates. And as a result, men and women are not only ignoring God's plan, they are replacing it with one of man's creation, all the while expecting God to be pleased with them for having preferred their approach to his. It is one thing to disappoint God and ignorantly miss your opportunity to capitalize on the means he provided 345 for you to meet with him, but it is another altogether to make him angry. And that is precisely what the faithful are doing when they revel in the worthless, pagan idolatry of their religion, worshipping a false god while believing that they are pleasing the real one. Now for the Jews who may be gloating that this does not apply to them because they still acknowledge the covenant and attend the feasts, I have some bad news. According to rabbis, the Berith is no longer a relationship agreement between Israel and Yahowah but one between Jews and Judaism. I suppose that they took exception to the covenant's prerequisite, which is that we disassociate ourselves from religious influences. As for the feasts, rabbis have been insidious. Just as Christians irritate God by celebrating Easter, Halloween, and Christmas, Jews have added Hanukkah, to celebrate a mythical event during a Jewish civil war using their counterfeit menorah, Rosh Hashanah, in observance of the Babylonian New Year, Shol Nidre, as a night devoted to fasting and affliction, Purim, to celebrate deliverance from Persia, Shmini Atzeret, serving as a festival for the dead, Tisha B'Av, commemorating a series of Jewish tragedies, Tu B'Shavot, planting trees as a legacy of Ashura Day which honored the Queen of Heaven and Mother of God, and finally Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day. It is a wonder, as obnoxious toward God as rabbis have been, that they have not yet initiated Yom Azab Yahowah to tell the world how they really feel. But alas, that would be too honest and require actually stating their adversary's name. So, while those 8 additions and substitutions have been added to the Jewish religious calendar, there is also the matter of perverting Yahowah's intent during the Mod Mikra. On Pesach, the rabbinical Seder plate resembles Cain's rejected offering with a medley of vegetables. The only acknowledgement of the lamb's 346 sacrifice is an inedible bone. The religious and cultural variation is in honor of being liberated from Egypt rather than observed as the doorway to eternal life. Chag Matzah is no longer celebrated. It has been relegated to the role of a missing ingredient during Passover. And without it, there is no redemption, perfection of one's soul, or salvation. There is no consideration whatsoever for Bikurim in Judaism, and thus no inclusion into the covenant family. And while the Torah was likely received by Moses beginning with Shabat, Jews have come to prefer their alternate Torah over it and are ignorant of the feast's purpose, which is to enrich and empower the beneficiaries of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. In Judaism, there is no mention of Towrah, and therefore, there is no acknowledgement of its purpose, which is to warn the unwary about the deadly consequence of being religious while ignoring and corrupting Yahowah's way. I suppose that is why Yahowah chose to deploy a guy to serve in this role, announcing his return. Rabbis have managed to invert the purpose of Yom Kippurim, changing it from a time of rejoicing over acknowledging Yahowah with the relationship reconciled, to a day of depriving and afflicting oneself while torturing chickens while traumatizing their children. With all the feathers flying, and tears flowing, they are blind to the realization that Yahowah will return with his son, Daud, on this day. Sukkah, likewise, is no longer observed as a time to camp out with Yahowah while celebrating our eventual return to Eden. In Judaism, it is comprised of 8 days of nothing. Although, that is not entirely true because the rabbis are enriched at this time by selling their etrogs, a bitter and inedible, thick and bumpy rind, useless and overpriced fruit to comply with their mitzvah. But be 347 forewarned, if you break your etrogs pitum before the end of the holiday, it is no longer valid for performing the mitzvah of waving. Be prepared to shell out another $70 to $100 to replace the sourpuss. You should not increasingly and habitually come, continuing to bring, lo yazaf elbow, you should not continually come and seek to be included by adding to and bearing, hyphal imperfect active, the L, to comes from one kesser, worthless, completely invalid, and futile, shower, vain and deliberately dishonest, illusory and misleading, wasteful and deceptive, from an unused root meaning without paying attention or giving proper consideration, tributes, gifts, and offerings mincha. Obligatory sacrifices offered to a deity as part of a religious activity. Incense, katorith, burning perfumed material to produce a fragrant smoke, from katar, to fumigate, driving out the occupants while killing the inhabitants, is a detestable abomination. Towrah is a repulsive, disgusting, rejected, religious, abhorrent, and idolatrous act, from Torah, a confusing, misleading, dishonest, and troublesome thing, to me, la any. I cannot comprehend, endure, or overcome, lo yakol. I am incapable of witnessing, understanding, and prevailing over, kal imperfect hoffel passive, literally and genuinely, on a continuing and ongoing basis with unfolding results, such that even passively when God isn't involved in the process, he cannot bear to experience, the deceptive and disastrous falsifications, A1, the diabolical fraud, the immoral and corrupting consequences, the unfavorable result, the deceitful and idolatrous words. The feigned worship and inappropriateness, associated with her oppressive and lifeless religious assemblies which hinder and withhold the benefits of YYV3C8, of the increasingly troublesome and barren crowds assembled during her celebrations and sacred assemblies for her religious holidays which restrain by holding people 348 back by adversely controlling them and governing in a manner that impedes the capacity of people to access the benefits through her distressing restraints which debilitate the intended purpose, the feminine of Azar, Otzer and Etzer, troublesome and barren religious gatherings which hinder, restrain, thwart, and disallow the intent of, the pronoun her is found in one kesser but not the mount, the time of renewal, Hadesh, Chodash, the occasion of repairing and re-establishing the relationship when reflected light on the moon's surface begins to grow. Designating a new month and initiating the timing of the Mikra to restore our relationship with God, from Chodash, to renew and restore, to reaffirm and re-establish, to repair and reintroduce a relationship, singular in one Kesser, and the Shabat, Wa Shabat, the promise of the seventh day as a time to celebrate the relationship, the calling out, Kara, the invitation and summons, the reading and reciting, the announcement and proclamation, the appointment and welcome, the encounters and meetings. Cal construct infinitive construct, active, literally and genuinely. Kara is grammatically bound to the Mikra regardless of time and place, of the Mikra, invitation to meet, Mikra, summons to a meeting for the purpose of reading and reciting so as to be called out and meet, from Kara, to invite and summon, to call out and to be called out, to welcome and to meet, to read and recite, to proclaim and to announce. Yasha'ah, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:13. Yahowah isn't denouncing or discarding his mode Mikra but is, instead, disparaging religious rites and rituals. Rather than replacing his plan with another, substituting Easter for Passover as an example, God is condemning religious corruptions, substitutions, and counterfeits. He is saying that religious holidays are deceptive and devastating. 349 This is a denunciation of Hanukkah, Rosh Hashanah, Shul Nidrei, Purim, Shmini Atzeret, Tisha B'Av, Tu B'Shavot, Yom HaShoah, and the rabbinical corruptions of Pesach, Matzah, Kippurim, and Sukkah. Secondarily, it tells us that God is highly offended by Ramadan, Christmas, Easter, and Halloween, New Year's Day, St. Valentine's Day, and Thanksgiving Day, May Day, Memorial Day, Independence Day, and Veterans Day. In the initial part of this statement, the verbs, yazaf and bo, are juxtaposed, and both are presented using the hyphal stem. This means that the subjects, which are those who are incessantly incorporating things God did not specify into their offerings, are causing the objects of these verbs, which are the pagan and idolatrous offerings, to participate in the action as an under, or secondary, subject. That is to say that these spurious and counterfeit religious rites are negatively affecting the religious while irritating God. To avoid both, never attend a worship service or celebrate any religious holiday. Both verbs were also inscribed in the imperfect, such that these incessant additions have become so common that they are habitually practiced. Moreover, they have ongoing consequences throughout time. This means that man's forgeries and counterfeits will continually make religious practices repugnant. Yahowah will never consider Purim or Hanukkah, Christmas or Easter, appropriate. They are a constant irritant to God. Had Yahowah said that the rites and rituals which comprise man's religious schemes were worthless, even futile, as they are all pagan and idolatrous, that should have been sufficient to dissuade people from participating in these misleading celebrations. But he went well beyond that, calling these spurious counterfeits of his plan Towrah an abomination. They are disgusting rituals, repugnant religious practices, and acts of worship which are repulsive. Rather than endear mankind to God, they 350 separate us all the more from him. Rather than please him, they repulse him. So, if you want to get as far away from God as is possible on this planet, then attend a religious service during Hanukkah or Easter. In the verbal phrase, Lo yakol awan wa'atzera, I cannot comprehend, endure, or overcome the deceptive falsifications associated with her oppressive and lifeless assemblies which hinder, atzera requires elucidation, even though its translation is straightforward. So much so, I'm surprised no other English translation picked up on the fact that atzera is the feminine of its verbal root, as are, to withhold by restraining people, controlling them to prevent access to something worthwhile. As are means to constrain, to detain, to adversely control, to govern in a manner that impedes by oppressively shutting down the capacity of people to access something which is beneficial. It, thereby, describes the consequence of religion, something we now know God cannot resolve or endure. This verb appears 46 times in the Torah, Nabi, and Mizmowr, over 4 times more often than the feminine form scribed here. The R variation of the verb then ascribes these behaviors to a festive celebration and sacred assembly comprised of a large gathering of people during a convocation for religious purposes. Also noteworthy, the pronoun her accompanies atzera in the Great Isaiah scroll, but it is not found in the more recent Masoretic text, further affirming that this is a feminine variation of the verb. Yahowah is not accommodating or compromising when it comes to those who stray from his instructions. While he does not hate or punish those who ignore his advice, that is not the case here where rabbis have deliberately and fraudulently corrupted his message through the incorporation of their religious edicts and rites. 351 For over 2 decades, I've recognized that God hates Christmas and Easter, Rosh Hashanah and Hanukkah, but I was unaware that Yahowah had stated his animosity so clearly. My lack of awareness, however, is not entirely my fault. Until I took the time to translate God's statement and thought about it, I was left to the deceptive falsifications promoted by English Bible translations. For example, the King James Version proposed, "Bring no more vain oblations, incense is an abomination unto me, the new moons and Sabbaths, the calling of assemblies, I cannot away with, it is iniquity, even the solemn meeting." I do not know what "I cannot away with" means, but I realize that this rendering errantly has God announcing that his Sabbaths and the calling of his assemblies are an iniquity, and, therefore, an injustice. This has the Christian God rejecting the solemn meeting, which, since it was rendered from Mikra, is, therefore, addressing either Chag Matzah, thereby annulling Passover, unyeasted bread, and firstborn children, or Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations. It is ironic that the KJV has their God requesting no more vain oblations, because an oblation is the act of making a religious offering as part of a worship service, and expressly includes the elements of the Eucharist. And while Yahowah could not have asked for no more of something he never requested in the first place, even if the KJV were correct, considering all of the incense burned in churches, this is yet another example of Christians ignoring what they have written in God's name. The NLT conspired to demean what their readers will assume is Judaism, especially with their erroneous reference to your special days for fasting. They did so of course with the addition of a host of words that do not actually appear in the text. "Stop bringing me your meaningless gifts, the incense of your offerings disgusts me. As for your celebrations of the new moon and the 352 Sabbath and your special days for fasting, they are all sinful and false. I want no more of your pious meetings." As a case in point, your does not exist in association with pious meetings. It was added to imply the fasts associated with Judaism had been annulled, paving the way to their pagan alternatives. Making himself perfectly clear, Yahowah is prophetically announcing that he isn't going to accept man's religious notions and allow them to smother key elements of his plan. It is one or the other. You cannot celebrate shelters and Christmas, Passover and Easter, observe the Shabat and worship on Sunday. For Yah's plan to prevail for you, you must exclusively rely on his plan of restoration, his Shabat, and his Mikra. Your times of renewal, Kodeshi, Chadashi, your means of re-establishing the relationship, during a new moon, designating a new month while reintroducing something, plural in one Kesser, and your designated meeting times, Wamodim, your schedule of seasonal meetings. My soul, Nipesheni, my consciousness and persona, hates, sane, abhors and detests the alterations, loathes and despises the changes, intensely dislikes and totally shuns the modifications, and considers the revisions adversarial. Cal perfect. They have literally become, higher, an annoying problem, Torah, a distressful and troublesome burden due to their vicious, predatory, and destructive nature, to me, Aleni. I am weary, La, I have grown impatient and exhausted, tired and emotionally unable, Nephil perfect, of enduring their duplicity, Nasa, of bearing their dishonesty and tolerating their fraudulent nature, indistinguishable from Nasha, utterly beguiling and deliberately deceptive, Cal infinitive. Yashar, salvation is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:14. 353. This is typical of Yahowah. First, he underscores his support for his plan. Then he reveals his disdain for the religious alternatives which deliberately corrupt and counterfeit his intent. This statement should be read as a direct attack on religious celebrations. Those who shrug off the Babylonian origins of religious holidays by saying that's not what they mean to me ought to think about God's pronouncement. It's foolish to participate in and perpetuate the kinds of things he hates. Jews and Christians have created their own times of renewal. 4 centuries after this was written, Judaism would usurp the Babylonian custom of beginning the year in the 7th month, replacing Yahowah's Yom Teruah with their Rosh Hashanah, head of the year. A millennium later, Christians incorporated the Roman ode to their god, Janus, the doorkeeper, celebrating New Year's Day on January 1st, as depicted upon their Roman Catholic calendar. The date for Easter, which is the Christian time of renewal, is based upon moon phases, which is why it is observed in March or April from year to year. So, Christianity has 2 such celebrations, justifying the plural of Chadashi all by itself. And as we noted, there are also 2 New Year's days in Judaism. There are actually 4, head of the year, New Year for trees, New Year for animals, and New Year of Kings. In particular, Christianity has grown by amalgamating pagan belief systems. The birth, death, and resurrection of the Christian Jesus Christ on Christmas, Good Friday, and Easter Sunday are played out in conjunction with the mythology of Bacchus, Dionysus, Osiris, and Tammuz. Virtually every detail, from the timing of Christmas to its decorated tree, wreaths, Yule logs, and exchange of presents is Babylonian in origin. Likewise, the Babylonians celebrated Easter on the Sunday nearest the vernal equinox, with an egg-laying bunny, ham, and hot 354 cross buns. Halloween, which is All Hallows Eve to Roman Catholics, is rooted in Roman mythology. It was easier for Christians to accommodate the religious practices of pagans than change the pagans, so that their actions reflected the Torah. But it was wrong. And since Christianity will never renounce Christmas, Easter, Sunday worship, Jesus Christ, the cross, the Trinity, its New Testament, its gospel of grace, and salvation through faith, it will continue to be wrong. These things known, how are we to interpret the idea that a spiritual being like God has a nefesh, soul? Surely it cannot be the same as ours, because when ours departs, we and other animals die. Further, since our physical bodies decay, our soul is the sole repository of our unique identity, conveying our character, personality, aptitudes, and experiences into the next life. The creator of trillions of souls cannot be limited to a single soul. The answer lies at the heart of this discussion. Dowd volunteered to provide his nefesh, soul, to personally satisfy and literally fulfill the mod mikrei, eternal witness to the restoring testimony of the invitations to be called out and meat of Pesach and matzah. God inserted Dowd's soul into an otherwise nondescript body such that his son could honor the promise made to Abraham to provide the Passover lamb. Then, since matzah required a soul to go to the place of separation to resolve the penalty of our religious malfeasance, carrying the guilt of the covenant family with him, Dowd accomplished this by sacrificing his nefesh. In this way, Dowd's soul allowed him to experience, to feel, see, and hear, it all because he was there. This part of the adventure was complete when the Ruach Kodesh released Dowd's soul from Sheol and reunited the Son of God with his father in Shamaim during Bikurim. Moving on to the next statement in this discussion, we discover that, unless it is to grasp his hand, God is not 355 interested in what we have in our hands. Other than to spend time with him, there is nothing we can give that he will even notice, much less accept. This then answers the question so many ask, wondering how divergent their religious faith can be from Yahowah's instructions. And with the spreading out, wabar paras, so in the extension and stretching out, of the palms of your hands, kafota, of your open hands, I will hide, alam, I will continually conceal, hyphal imperfect, my eyes ein eni, my appearance and presence, from you, minatum. Also, gam, in addition, although, and moreover, because, ky, you choose to make many long, rabbinic, rabbah, you elect to multiply your exalted, increasingly choosing to make numerous, hyphal imperfect jussive, and worthless prayers, abhorrent pleas, and repulsive petitions, tafila, characterless requests, objectionable appeals, and repugnant demands, from tipila, wrong, criminal, empty, and loathsome and palal, requests for intervention and intercession, I will not be listening, ein any shama, nor will I pay attention, not even bothering to hear them. Your hands, yathowm, are full of the shedding of blood, damim male, are satisfied with and scream of bloodlust, and your fingers are full of iniquity, wa etzba male bar a1, and your grasp is satiated with mischief and perversity, depravity and corruption, from 1 Kesser. Yashea, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:15. God repeatedly encourages us to listen to him, but never once asks us to pray to him. There are few things more important than understanding why this is in our interest. In this case and in many others, Yahowah unequivocally states that he does not listen to religious 356 prayers, petitions or pleas. At best, they would annoy him and, more likely, repulse him. The Pauline command to pray without ceasing is bad advice, as is the Hasidic propensity to recite ritualistic prayers. God is smart, and he has a lot to say that is in our interest to hear. Since Yahowah has delineated the conditions of the covenant, since he has issued invitations to be part of his family, since he has provided more than enough teaching to understand who he is and what he wants, since he has articulated guidance to direct our lives onto the path home, and since he told us his will for our lives, by asking for any of these things, we irritate him. It would be like us as parents repeatedly, tangibly, and overwhelmingly demonstrating our love for our children, only to have one of them ignore everything we have said and done over a lifetime and ask us how we feel about them. If you want to have a conversation with God, begin by listening to him. Recite the Torah aloud. Think about what you have heard and then respond to him as he has asked. If you have a question, he knows it before you have formed it, and if it is pertinent, he provided the answer through one of his prophets long ago. I would recommend that we follow Dowd's example. He observed the Torah, allowing Yahowah to instruct and guide him. And then, through his lyrics and prose, he shared what he had learned, teaching us what we need to know. God is revealing that religion is the deadliest scheme ever conceived by man. It is infectious and fatal. Just as a single germ can kill a person, it doesn't take much religion to poison a mind, corrupt one's thinking, or destroy a soul. More than anyone on earth, the founders and proponents of religion have blood on their hands. 357 Their deadly schemes kill by corrupting Yah's Torah testimony, by perverting and twisting it. And this is precisely what the likes of Paul, Akiba, and Maimonides have done with their fingers. Yahowah is perfect and so is his home in heaven. He will not allow anyone to soil it by tracking in religious rubbish. Before an individual can walk to God, before a person can know God, before a soul can engage in a relationship with God, and before anyone can be saved by God, they must first walk away from religion. The reference to foreign sediment speaks of the religious ways of the Gentiles. Choose to actually wash yourselves, rachats, of your own free will, remove the impurities and bathe yourself using an abundance of water, cal imperative, desiring to be clean, free of foreign sediment and impure substances, upright and acquitted, wazaka, thereby demonstrating your desire to be cleansed and innocent, from an unused root meaning to be translucent, hit pale imperative, you should choose to act independently and not be influenced by others to avoid contaminants, and then, so then, from one kesa. Of your own free will turn away from and reject, so, of your own accord abstain, leaving, forsaking, abandoning, and cutting off all ties with degenerate corruption, changing direction to desist from the revolting nature of, your errant and counterproductive, yathowm, your immoral and improper countrymen, invalid and hindering kin, and displeasing and unethical, corrupting and malevolent, practices and endeavors, malalal, deeds and undertakings. Acts and services, from alol, to wantonly and ruthlessly take advantage of others by playing them for fools, from before, min-nedged, from conspicuously in front of, my eyes eineni, my sight, refraining from and ceasing to consent to, podol, giving up and refusing, discontinuing and objecting to, being 358 invalidated, unethical, improper, and errant, evil and counterproductive, malevolent and corrupting, and perverted, hyphal infinitive absolute active. Yashayahu, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:16. Yahowah is not suggesting we try to perfect ourselves. He is not asking us to save ourselves. He is, however, requesting that we disassociate from the counterproductive filth and invalidating endeavors which have made us dirty from his perspective, and then take a bath, washing away the impurities of these religious corruptions which have soiled our hands and stained our minds. So long as we listen and are responsive, with an assist from his Son, he will take it from there. But there is no merit in bathing if a person is going to crawl right back down into the garbage and wallow in the mud. This is one of many reasons God cannot save a religious person. Those who learn these things from Yahowah seek to be right and become judgmental, pleading against the oppressors while adjudicating on behalf of their victims. They call out to those who listen, to those who seek to be free of human corruption, and they call them home. We are to quarrel with the religious, showing our hostile opposition to the congregation of the dumb and forsaken. And while you wouldn't realize any of this by reading a KJV, NAS NLT, or JPS, it's all there in the words Yahowah inspired Yeshua describe on our behalf. Correctly translated, his pronouncements resonate with those of us who are no longer religious or political, patriotic or conspiratorial. Once we learned the truth, we felt dirty and couldn't wait to scrape away the filth. We all felt like we needed a shower. But once we began to shed the crud that had occluded our vision and burdened our minds, we felt this overwhelming desire to learn and then to share what we 359 had discovered. It is the same for all of us, which is why these words resonate with the covenant's children. Desire learning, lamed, be receptive to being taught, become open to instruction, gaining information which provides valid directions and then respond properly, choosing to accept, cal imperative, to be right and to prosper, yathowr, to improve and be successful, to do well, to engage effectively and to be pleasing, agreeable, and satisfied. Seek, derosh, actually choose to inquire about and study, genuinely consult and investigate, petition and ponder, and as a result flourish, grow by choosing, cal imperative, the means to make an informed and rational decision about the way to justly resolve disputes, mishpat, the ability to exercise good judgment regarding being honest and correct, fair and just, vindicating or condemning. Choose to walk the right way to receive the benefits of the relationship and to serve as a guide along the proper path, ashar, desire being led the correct way to get the most out of life, peel, the object enjoys the effect and is transformed by the verb, imperative, under the auspices of free will, active, for all those who are oppressed by human institutions, chamots, for everyone without status cruelly subjugated by the political and religious establishments, including those who are leavened, embittered, and soured. Be judgmental, choosing of your own volition to plead on behalf, shaphat, choose to adjudicate by making and promoting informed and rational decisions and by forming reasonable conclusions which lead to vindication and enable executing good judgment when arguing on behalf, cal imperative active, of the fatherless child, yathowm, an orphan whose father is dead but who still has a widowed or divorced mother, a class of 360 individuals deprived of appropriate resources, from an unused root meaning lonely. Akin to yathowr, those who are searching and exploring, seeking to find credible information. Quarrel with, ribe, choose to contend, bringing a legal argument, showing hostility in willful opposition, filing a complaint using words to plead in disagreement with, even taunting, insulting, mocking, and ridiculing, imperative active, the congregation of the bound, dumb, and forsaken, almoner, the silent and silenced who are unable to speak, those who have joined in and are now bound to religion, including the widow whose spouse has died and by extension, is in a state of abandonment. From the prolonged and feminine of Alam, the bereaved worshipping congregation who are being controlled and kept from speaking out. Note, religion is from the Latin religare, to join and bind. Yashar, salvation is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:17. In one way or another, every member of Yahowah's covenant is engaged in this debate. Yes, we do so because Yahowah, whom we respect and love, asked us to speak out in this manner. But even if that had not been the case, nothing on earth would stop us, because a relationship this satisfying and benefits this appealing must be shared, not hoarded. Moreover, it is the most appropriate and compassionate way to interact with others. The moment we learn the truth and enter the covenant, it is so liberating and empowering, so enriching and enlightening. We want the orphan child and widow, representing Israel and Yahuwah, to know what we have experienced. We also realize that no matter the time or place, we all come to God the same way. And since the first step of our journey is away from the controlling nature of religion, governance, and the family of man, it is essential for us to oppose each, bringing sound arguments from Yahowah's word against them, so that receptive and thoughtful 361 individuals are able to take the next step, which is to approach God through His Torah, guidance and instructions. It is Yahowah's desire and our choice to lamed, learn from His Torah, teaching. For this to occur, we have to be open and receptive to God's instructions. So, after disassociating ourselves from religion and removing its stench from our souls, we are afforded an unfettered opportunity to know God, and to engage in a relationship with Him. And it all begins with a willingness to learn what Yahowah has to say. The object of our education is yathowr, being right. Good is nice, but only right is vindicating. When it comes to God, the first is pleasant, while the other will bring us home. For example, King Saul was good, an impressive and imposing man, but wrong, and he is in Sheol, hell. King Daud's choices were not always perfect, but he was consistently right, and so he is in Shamim, heaven. Once we realize that Yahowah is the one we should trust, and then recognize that we find His guidance in His Torah, we are wise to derosh, seek the right way. Properly focused, our study is less for scholarship than it is to enjoy the ensuing relationship. When we do, we discover that Yahowah has invited us to meet with Him each step of the way along the 7-step plan He has articulated to perfect our souls, making us immortal so that He can adopt, enrich, and empower us. This path is known as the Mikra, invitations to be called out and meet with God. The way home is found exclusively in Yahowah's Torah, teaching and guidance. Collectively, they serve to mishpat, provide the means to make an informed and rational decision about the way Yahowah has provided to correctly resolve the issues 362 which would otherwise separate us and keep us out of heaven. Moving on to the next alluring word in Yahowah's pronouncement, we find that Ashar speaks of the proper way to receive the benefits of the relationship. Ashar results in being joyous and upright. To Ashar is to be guided along the correct path and then to serve as a guide. In this case, Yahowah's children are being asked to lead the chamots, oppressed away from the caustic influence of religion and governmental control. God is encouraging us to reach out to those who have been subjugated by these institutions, showing them the way to freedom. We can point them toward the Mikra of Matzah, where the embittered leavening which had soured their souls can be removed. Shaphat encourages us to do precisely what the politically correct and the religious condemn, to be judgmental. Their collective opposition to exercising good judgment is one of the few instances where the secular and sectarian agree. Unfortunately, as we might expect, their positions are in direct conflict with God's instructions. To be shaphat is to jump boldly into the midst of a controversy, discriminating between truth and deception, advocating for what is right while condemning what is wrong. It is the antithesis of being tolerant, the opposite of coexisting, the inverse of multiculturalism. We ought to reject, not respect, that which is deceitful and harmful. This is the most compassionate, beneficial, and moral approach to life. Those who have been rendered incapable of shaphat, being judgmental, of being discerning and discriminating, of differentiating between right and wrong are called progressives today. This zealous socialist belief system devoid of evidence and reason is sponsored by the 363 media and academia. It is now running rampant among disenfranchised Jews and other leftist and controlling politicians, and has positioned itself as the thought police of social media, determining what people can say and share, even know. Its victims are rudderless in a turbulent and deadly sea. Deprived of accurate charts or a functioning compass, there is nothing to guide them home, no route they can follow to a safe harbor. Progressives have unwittingly put the world at the mercy of a massive, unabated, and life-threatening storm that has swept across the globe, depriving billions of their liberty and livelihoods during the COVID-19 pandemic. And with their ability to reason impaired, even if they could fix the rudder of the state, align the national compass, and locate accurate charts, they wouldn't know how to read them or respond to the information they provide. This is a daunting predicament because progressives control most of the Western world. And to a person, they fail to recognize the seriousness of the situation in which they have placed humanity. They are never accountable, because somewhere in the background there will always be a newscaster, another politician, an internet mogul, a religious leader, or a scholar insisting that it's not their fault that we are all in this mess. They will even advocate doubling down, spending ever more money and imposing even more government restrictions to thwart the problems they have caused through these things. No amount of irrefutable evidence nor unassailable reason will persuade those who are unwilling to be discerning and who refuse to exercise good judgment. This deplorable condition was perpetrated deliberately in Western societies. With information becoming so readily available, the only way to influence and control vast populations is to render the masses incapable of processing information rationally. But this pervasive mental disability is no less severe in religious societies where reason is 364 presented as the foe of faith, so much so that those who promote it are slandered and dismissed as satanic. The last of the 4 sentences which comprise Yashar, Isaiah 1:17 reads, "Quarrel with, ribe, choose to contend, bringing a legal argument, showing hostility in willful opposition, filing a complaint using words to plead in disagreement with, even taunting, insulting, mocking, and ridiculing, cal imperative active, the congregation of the bound, dumb, and forsaken, almoner, the silent and silenced who are unable to speak, those who have joined in and are now bound to religion, including the widow whose spouse has died and by extension is in a state of abandonment, from the prolonged and feminine of alam, the bereaved worshipping congregation who are being controlled and kept from speaking out." Note, religion is from the Latin liga, to join and bind. To ribe is to quarrel, to be contentious, and to oppose. It isn't a polite, politically correct term, because it suggests that we should taunt, insult, mock, and ridicule the almoner, congregation of the bound, dumb, and forsaken. God does not want his children to be respectful, civil, gracious, or courteous when engaging in hostile opposition toward religion. Man's way is deceitful, destructive, deadly, and damning. There is nothing good about any of this. Yahowah hates religion, as should we. Therefore, he is hoping that we will follow his example and ribe, use words to plead the case against the institutions which bind and silence their victims, the religions and politics of man. Since ribe only means plead in the sense of pleading against, we cannot translate almoner as widow, as is the custom of most English Bibles. Yah does not want us to berate or mock those who have lost their husbands. This compels us to choose a more suitable and contextually appropriate definition for almoner, which is the feminine 365 of almon. And as we search the lexicons, we are immediately confronted by a wide variety of people who are yathowm, directing us to translate almoner as religious, those who are bound to their faith and silenced by the authorities. Affirming the validity of this option, in just 4 more verses, Yahowah will introduce us to the whore of religion, tying all of this together. This encouragement before us, I love what follows. Please, nah, considering the urgency and consequence of the exhortation, let's go for a walk, Hollock, let's choose to stroll through life together, let's go on a voyage of discovery, traveling through space and time, come, let's proceed, cal imperative active, because I always want to engage in rational dialogue, Yaka, I want us to reason together because I want to prove my case and it's my desire to vindicate you, Nephil, the subject, God, carries out and receives the action, cohortative, first-person volition. Imperfect, continuously with unfolding implications, says, Amar, conveys and attests, Yahowah, Yahowah, the proper pronunciation of Yahowah based upon his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence. Even if, even though your sins, shetter, your offenses against the standard and your resulting guilt, the consequences of missing the way, are, higher, exist, as, kar, crimson, harshani, scarlet apparel, like, kar, snow, shalag, they shall be made white, Laban, becoming purified and spotless, hyphal imperfect active. Even if, even though, they are continually as ruddy red and as dirty as Adam, the name of the first man created in Yah's image, the word for mankind, the word for ground as in dirt, the word for red, and as a verb, to become reddish, hyphal imperfect active, like, kar, crimson, harshani, scarlet apparel, they shall be like wool, kar heart sema higher. Yashar, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:18. 366 Yahowah designed us to walk with him. We were conceived to engage in an upright relationship with our Creator, not to bow down and worship the gods of the creation's making. There are few things Yah anticipates more than strolling through his universe with his children. It is what Adam did with Yahowah in the garden. It is what we will do with him throughout space and time. God is not demanding in this regard. We are free to walk to him or away from him, with him or without him. God even gave Adam the option to avoid him and still not be alone, which is why he created Towrah, one who makes her thoughts known as a human companion. That is to say, God does not want a captive audience. He does not want us to choose him out of default, boredom, or loneliness, especially fear, or for any reason other than we genuinely enjoy his company. The walks we will take with God will be neither lectures nor silent strolls. God wants to engage in rational dialogue. It is the same with our children. Our time with them becomes so much more enjoyable, when they can understand what we are sharing and respond in an engaging way. Yahowah's approach to humankind is through rational discourse. His Torah serves to logically present what God has to say about himself, about us, about the things that bring us together, and about the things which tear us apart. The Torah is a thoughtful, verifiable, reliable, and comprehensive presentation of everything we need to know God and ourselves. Therefore, there is no reason to ask for God's will for our lives. He has stated it here. And remarkably, he not only began his plea with "Nah, please," he had Yahowah scribe it in the cohortative mood, which 367 expresses first-person volition. It is God's will that we walk with him, and talk with him. This discussion, however, cannot commence with prayer. We must listen first, otherwise, we are almost certain to make a fool of ourselves. God is not interested in receiving a to-do list from anyone. Don't ask him to help you win the lottery or the game, get a good grade on the test, to get well, to find a job or a spouse, save your country or your friend. If you want God to engage on your behalf, if you want him to listen to you, if you want him to care about you, show that you care enough about him that you are willing to listen to and think about what he has revealed, then engage in rational discourse. If, whenever and so often as, you are genuinely willing, you voluntarily agree, and consistently provide your consent, kal imperfect Yosef active, and, you listen, shama, receive the pronouncements, hearing what is communicated, kal perfect active, you shall actually and continually be nourished by, kal, you shall taste and consume, eating and feeding upon, kal imperfect, the good and beneficial qualities, tob, the attractive, beautiful, nurturing, and abundance, the best and most enjoyable aspects of the land, ha-eres, of the physical realm, earth, and region. Yashar, salvation is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:19. Specifically, the land is Yisrael, the promised land, and the home of God in the material world. But Eres also serves as a metaphor for Eden, for Sukkah, and for heaven, for living with God as part of his covenant. This does not seem like a difficult choice, so why did Yahowah have to say 368? But if, you consistently refuse to agree and continually withhold your consent, you are unwilling and defiant, peel imperfect active, and, are rebellious, mara, are recalcitrant and contentious, kal perfect active, by the sword, cherub, by weapons of war, you shall be devoured, kal, you shall be consumed, paul imperfect passive, the object passively suffers the effect of the verb on an ongoing basis, because, truly, the mouth, pay, of Yahowah. The proper pronunciation of the name of Yahowah, our Eloah, God as directed in his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence and our shalom, restoration, has spoken it, dabar, has said it, conveyed and communicated it, announcing and declaring it, peel perfect, Yahowah actively causes the object to experience the verb's action and does not have to repeat himself. Yashar, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 1:20. For every corruption, there is a cause and a consequence. Fortunately, there is also a cure. The revealing communication of Yahowah, salvation is from Yahowah, son of Amos, the trustworthy and steadfast, whereby beneficially he compiled and revealed a written prophetic record of the covenant relationship concerning Yahweh, meaning related to Yah, and Shalem, in the days of Yahweh, boldness and empowerment are from yathowm, Yahowah is perfect, Ahaz, he has grasped hold, and Yoikyah, strengthened by Yahowah, rulers of Yahweh, the beloved of Yahowah. Yashar, Isaiah 1:1. Listen, spiritual realm, and choose of your own accord to pay attention and respond, material realm, because Yahowah has spoken, I read my children, lifting them up, helping them grow, and enabling them to be great, and I raised them, taking them to a higher 369 place, but they have actually rebelled against me. Yashar, 1-2. A cow sees what is around him and, viewing the world from the proper perspective, is aware of the one who gave birth to him, and an ass, a stubborn domestic beast of burden, his lord. Yisrael, individuals who struggle and fight with God, does not know. My people have failed to consider this connection and thus do not understand. Yashar, 1-3. Woe to an errant and blameworthy nation akin to Gentiles, severely stubborn and heavily laden, dulled and unresponsive with the corruptions and the guilt associated with perverted distortions, the offspring of errant and evil children who corrupt and lack integrity. They have rejected and abandoned Yahowah. They have come to despise and actually revile, genuinely feeling contempt for the set-apart one of Israel. They have become strangers, alienating themselves, having gone backward in the wrong direction. Yashar, 1-4. For what reason, and on whose account, do you want to be continually afflicted over and over again, associating with and adding to your obstinate rebellion? The entire head is impaired with disease. The heart, and thus the ability to exercise good judgment, is cramped up and infirmed. Yashar, 1-5. From the sole of the foot and all the way up to the top of the head, there is nothing in it that is healthy or sound. Emasculated and castrated, battered and bruised, with wounds associated with a devastating plague which are raw and rotten, they have not been cleansed, medicated, or bandaged, not even soothed with olive oil. Yashar, 1-6. 370 Your land will become lifeless and ruined. Your cities and towns will be consumed by fire. Your soil will be destroyed by illegitimate, unauthorized, and foreign foes, the most nauseating of whores. They will bring devastating perversity, and adversarial transformations. Yashar, 1-7. But the daughter of Zion, the conspicuous signs posted to mark the way, will be preserved and left as a reminder. It will be like a sheltered place for living in a vineyard, like an overnight cottage for a watchman in a challenging, ill-treated garden filled with vehemently difficult stubble, like an awakened encampment preserved by the observant. Yashar, 1-8. If Yahowah of the host of spiritual messengers had not spared and preserved a remnant on our behalf as a few survivors, then like Sodom we would have been, and approaching Gomorrah, we would be likened and compared. 1-9. You will listen to the word of Yahowah, political and religious leaders of what is likened to Sodom. So, then you should choose of your own free will to hear, perceiving what is said and then respond appropriately to the Torah, teaching and guidance of our God, people of Gomorrah. Yashar, 1-10. By what means do you think that I can be approached by the great multitude and rabbinic nature of your sacrifices? Asks Yahowah. I will literally and actually fulfill, satisfy, and complete the uplifting offerings to rise associated with the male lambs. In addition, the lipid tissue of overfed fatlings and the blood of bulls, lambs, and goats, I do not want or desire. Yashar, 1-11. Because if you come to approach my presence, who or what was it that sought this beggary from your hand? 371 Thereby treading upon the blowing of my trumpets in my court. Yashar, 1-12. You should not habitually come, continuing to bring worthless, completely invalid, and deceptively futile tributes, gifts, and offerings. Incense is a detestable abomination to me. I cannot comprehend, endure, or overcome the deceptive and disastrous falsifications associated with your oppressive religious assemblies which forestall the benefits of the time of renewal as well as the Shabat, even the calling out of the Mikra, invitation to be called out and meet. Yashar, 1-13. Your times of renewal, and your designated meeting times, my soul hates. They have literally become an annoying problem for me. I am weary of enduring their duplicity. Yashar, 1-14. And in conjunction with reaching out with the palms of your hands, I will hide my appearance and presence from you. Also, because you choose to make many worthless rabbinic prayers, abhorrent pleas, and repulsive petitions, I will not be listening. Your hands are full of the shedding of blood and your fingers are full of iniquity. Yashar, 1-15. Choose to actually wash yourselves and, of your own free will, remove the impurities, bathing yourself using an abundance of water, demonstrating a desire to be free of foreign sediment and impure substances. And then of your own volition, reject and turn away from your evil and counterproductive rituals and endeavors. These things you have done before my eyes, thereby refraining from being invalidated or seen as unethical, improper, and errant. Yashar, 1-16. 372 Desire learning, be receptive to instruction and to being right. Choose to inquire about the means to justly resolve disputes and to exercise good judgment. Walk along the correct path to get the most out of life, serving as a guide for those who are oppressed by human institutions. Be judgmental, pleading on behalf of the fatherless child, especially those who are searching. Quarrel, verbally contending with, even ridiculing the congregation of the bound, dumb, and forsaken. Yashar, 1-17. Please, let's go for a walk because I want to continuously engage in rational dialogue, says Yahowah. Even if your sins are as crimson, like snow, they shall be made white. Even if they are continually as ruddy red and as dirty as Adam, like crimson, they shall be like wool. Yashar 1:18. Whenever you are genuinely willing to listen, then by way of the good and beneficial qualities of the land you shall be continually nourished. Yashar 1:19. But if you consistently refuse to agree and continually withhold your consent and are rebellious, by the sword, you shall be devoured, because the mouth of Yahowah has spoken it. Yashar, Yahowah saves, Isaiah 1:20. The first chapter of Yashar contained the first of the prophet's 12 references to the Torah. His second is found in the second chapter. It begins by reminding us that this message was inspired by Yahowah. The man was merely a conduit. 373 Among the many amazing revelations found in these words is the realization that Yahowah remains focused upon this one place, these specific people, and this singular process. For those paying attention, this provides additional proof that God has no regard for the Vatican, for Mecca, Beijing, Rome, London, Paris, Berlin, Moscow, New York, Hollywood, or Washington. And even worse for those who favor these places and the institutions they spawned. Immediately after re-establishing his home in Yerushalayim, Yahowah is going to eradicate these things and the people who promote them. This is the word, hadabar, that relationally and beneficially, Asher, Yashar, salvation is from Yahowah, from 1 Kesser versus Yashayahu in Mount, son, then, of Amotes, trustworthy and steadfast, confirming, upholding, supportive, nourishing, and establishing, observed in the prophetic vision, Chazown, received from God, beheld, looked upon, and perceived, concerning, Yahowah, relate to Yah and related to Yah, and, Yerushalayim, source from which teaching, guidance, direction, and instruction flow regarding reconciliation and restoration. Yashar, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 2:1. Next, we are reminded that these words depict events which will unfold during the last days. Therefore, since Yahowah mentions the Torah in this context, its relevance endures. These essential truths acknowledged, set your watch and mark your calendar. In Yerushalayim, Yahowah between Yom Kippurim in year 6000 year, beginning at sunset, 6:22 p.m. in Yerushalayim, the Sunday evening October 2, 2033, and Sukkah 5 days later, Friday after sunset, a Shabat on October 7, 2033, this will all occur. 374 It shall come to pass, Wahaya, it shall come to exist, Kal perfect, during the last days, Bar Akarith Yamim, in the end of days, at the conclusion of the last point of a period of time, from a char, afterward, following something and in conjunction with it, established and firmly fixed, completed and enduring, Kun, appointed and developed, prepared and readied, constituted and steadfast, needful passive, the subject, Yahowah's home, carries out and receives this action, the house, home, and family, Baith. The household, of Yahowah, the proper pronunciation of Yahowah based upon his Torah, teaching regarding his higher, existence, will exist, higher, will come to be, arising, and appearing, remaining and enduring, situated upon and accompanying, abiding, Kalim perfect active, in proximity to, bar, by and within the vicinity of, with and among, note, written bar not al, upon, the summit of the first and foremost, Rosh, the most crucial. The top and uttermost, the initial and beginning, the choicest and finest, the summit, mountain, Har, of the mountains, Har Harim, of the hilltops, Wa, lifted up, supported, and sustained, Nasa, be respected and honored, raised and desired, supported and sustained, needful passive, as part of, min, from and by way of, made of and because of, these elevated places, Jaibar, the knolls, hilltops, and rounded summits. So then, Wa, every, shirl, Gentile, Gawim, shall flow forth with joyful countenance, beaming with happiness, and shining brightly, Nahar, exuberant expressions of jubilation shall flow like a stream of radiant light in a linear motion, traveling en masse like an illuminated and shimmering river, Kal perfect active, over this, Al-Hu, as a result of this, from 1 Kesser, Mount Hazel, to it. Yashar, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 2:2. This is prophetic of Yahowah erecting his home among his mountains, in the first and foremost location, in 375 the place he began, in Yerushalayim. Mortal men will not be constructing a third temple. God, himself, with his covenant family at his side, will be the architect and builder. Before we consider how this will be accomplished, a word about the Gawim is in order. Since Yahowah previously used Gawi to describe the religious corruption he found so revolting in Israel, and has just revealed that those who remain infected with this deadly plague will vanish upon his return, Shirl Gawim represents Gentiles, like myself, who have walked away from man's perversions to engage in the covenant. That is why we are all beaming, radiating Yah's light, with expressions of great joy. In our not too distant future, the earth will be returned to the conditions experienced in the Garden of Eden, as Yahowah camps out with his creation in Yerushalayim. Then the world will come to Yahowah, the God of Israel, to learn all that can be known about his Torah. And then, empowered, Rab, numerous, many, and great, people who are part of the family, related individuals who share a common language, characteristics, and kinship who follow the same example, shall travel, Holok, shall walk, making progress, Kal perfect active, and they shall say, they will profess, declare, and affirm, Kal perfect active, walk, Holok, journey, making one's way, because we can of our own volition ascend, so as to choose to rise, being lifted up, ascribed a high status. Increasing and growing, being brought to meet the light, Kal imperfect active cohortative, 2, the mountain, of Yahowah, the proper pronunciation of Yahowah based upon his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence, to the house and family, Baith, to the household and home, of the God, Elohim, of Yaakov, reward or consequence, Yaakov, my stance, Jacob. The father who became Yisrael, from Akab 376, to receive the benefit or suffer the consequence of circumventing and overreaching, digging in by being stubborn or embedding one's heels to be steadfast, a synonym for Yisrael and the covenant, so that he can fulfill his will to teach and guide us, Yara and Akyu, so that he can do what he wants with us, which is to provide the source from which guidance, direction, instruction, and teaching flow from him to us. Note: Yara is the verb that defines Torah and it serves as the basis for the name, Yerushalayim, hyphal imperfect jussive, an expression of third-person volition, making this year's will, whereby there is a continuing and unfolding benefit of the instruction because the subject, God, causes the object, which is us, to benefit from this guidance. One Kesser uses the pronoun they to suggest that Yahowah and Yaakov are guiding us, by means of, from and as part of, his ways, Derek Hugh, his path and direction. His journey and route, his way of life and way to walk, his means to vigor, empowerment, and enrichment, so that, we can choose to genuinely and continually journey through life, Holok, we can consistently travel of our own free will, actually electing to make our way by walking, Kal cohortative imperfect, in his manner, or a hue, in his way of traveling, journeying from one place to another along his route, and way of living as a wayfarer and voyager. For indeed, because, truly, from, out of and by way of, Zion, the conspicuous signs posted to mark the way, Zion, the signposts providing directions along the route, and the instructive markers on the path, shall be brought forth, Yatzah, shall serve to produce and bring forth, shall mark the source of, Kal imperfect, the Torah, the source from which teaching, guidance, direction, and instruction flow, and, the word, the speech, communication, statements, and account, of Yahowah. The proper pronunciation of Yahowah based upon his Torah 377, teaching regarding his higher existence, from, Yerushalayim, the source of guidance on reconciliation, Yerushalayim, the place from which direction and teaching regarding restoration flow. Yashar, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 2:3. Hasta la vista Christianity. Ciao Islam. Adieu Judaism. Goodbye and good riddance. The Torah, like Yahowah, has returned to Yerushalayim. Therefore, the Christian New Testament, the Jewish Talmud, the Islamic Quran, and the Communist Manifesto have gone from errant and irrelevant to non-existent, and those who have placed their faith in them are no more. Our Heavenly Father's desire as a parent is to Yara, guide and teach his covenant children. His instructions are obviously found in his Torah, which features the conditions for participating in his covenant family. This path that we are invited to walk in conjunction with the Torah is guided by Zion. Moreover, Zion, the Torah, the word of Yahowah, Yaakov, and Yerushalayim are being presented as an integrated whole, as parts of the same path to God, with the first providing guidance, the second answers, the third God's promises, the fourth provides the name of the principal beneficiary, and the fifth identifies the place it will all transpire. This is akin to the Mikra of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim being a single event, a celebration that leads to Shabat. As we approach God's next statement, Yahowah reveals that the basis for determining the fate of Gentiles will be the Torah, expressly as it was revealed on Shabat and then fulfilled on Zion. This is good news for those who have embraced the covenant but bad for those who think that God discarded his original plan and replaced it with rabbinical arguments, a Pauline rant, or Islamic jihad. 378 Then, he shall execute good judgment, shaphat, he shall adjudicate and litigate, bringing justice as the judge, Kal perfect, being discerning by making appropriate connections regarding, bayan, showing understanding among, from bin, comprehending and understanding through intellectual observation, discernment, and consideration of, the Gentiles, yathowm, the people of nations other than Israel. Then, he shall reasonably conclude that many enriched and empowered, rabbim, numerous and great, people who are part of the family, related individuals who share a common language, characteristics, and kinship who follow the same example, are right, deciding to vindicate them once and for all. He shall prove the case, arbitrating and arguing on behalf of those he chooses and prefers, perfect active. They shall beat, kath, they will grind, their swords, cherub, their weapons of war, for plows, for implements designed to till the ground, and, their spears, shinith, their piercing projectiles, for pruning hooks, Mizmowr, for husbandmen's tendril knives to dress vines. Gentile nations, foreign people, shall not rise up, shall not elevate or promote, exalt or honor, not ever showing acceptance and tolerance, never lifting up, toward, Gentile nations, nations of foreign people, deploying weapons of war, cherub, using swords. They will not train or teach, while low-lamed, they will not accept submission, becoming accustomed to, responding to or learning, war, milchama, continuous battles, combat between nations, fighting between militias and militaries, ever again, any longer, and forever. Yashar, salvation is from Yahowah, Isaiah 2:4. 379. It is telling that the first thing Yahowah states that will be different now that all of the religious and political types have been eradicated, and only reconciled Yathowm and Gentile covenant members remain, is that there will be no weapons and no wars. This not only suggests that war is the common denominator throughout time among nations, and that a continual state of conflict has been inspired by religion, but also that combat is disdained by God. He does not support or bless troops. He does not engage in any battle on behalf of any nation, save Israel. Now that there are no religions and no politicians, no weapons and no wars, it is time for Israel to fulfill her destiny. House, Beth, home and family, of Jacob, my stance, Jacob, the father who became Israel, from Akab, to receive the benefit or suffer the consequence, digging in one's heels to be steadfast, a synonym for Israel and the covenant, choose to walk because then we can journey throughout space and time of our own volition, we can consistently travel of our own free will, actually electing to make our way, imperative cohortative imperfect, in the light, or, with the illumination, of Yahowah, the proper pronunciation of the name of Yahuwah, our Eloah, God has directed in his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence, and our shalom, restoration. Yashar, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 2:5. This has always been the purpose of creation. It is the reason we exist. Yahowah conceived us to walk with him, to travel throughout time and space in his light. It is the way God intends to perfect us, to make us immortal, to enrich us, empower us, enlighten us, making us ever more like him. With his light, we will emerge from our three-dimensional constraints and be capable of experiencing 380 every aspect of the six-dimensional universe he created for us to explore together. God is speaking of the 1,000-year rite, of the celebration of heaven on earth known as the millennial Shabat of Sukkah, which will commence on shelters in year 6000 year. 2.5 volumes ago, at the beginning of the first volume of the Introduction to God, I encouraged you to join me in embarking on a great journey of discovery. Now Yahowah has extended the same invitation. As a spiritual being, Yahowah's nature is best understood as light, which is to say that it is more similar to energy than to matter, making him much more powerful and capable than anything found in the material realm. Light, as the first thing Yahowah created, is not subject to decay nor is it limited by time. Light, which makes observation possible, enables us to know Yahowah and understand his Towrah, guidance. Therefore, when Yahowah returns, he will arrive as light and not as a material being diminished by the constraints of using a human form. And along with him, the Torah, the very word of God, Jacob's descendants, and Yerushalayim will all radiate the same divine light. Currently, almost everyone is estranged from God. They are denied these benefits because they have been beguiled by one of many religious or political schemes. So, in spite of Yahowah's marvelous offer, they keep wallowing in Babel's trash. Except indeed, on the contrary, because, you have rejected and abandoned, you have forsaken and discontinued all associations with, withdrawing and dispersing from, perfect, your family, Amota, your people, the house and home 381 Beth, household, of Jacob, the father of the 12 tribes and thus a synonym for Israel and the covenant, because, they are satisfied with and promote, male, they are full of and loudly proclaim, that which comes from, min, that which comes out of. Eastern antiquity, Kidem, an orientation toward the rising sun and prior times, denoting the religious practices previously born in Babel, Babylon, east of Yisrael, from Kedam, to anticipate and confront beforehand and then meet and receive, and, Wah, those who revel in spiritualism, and under false pretenses listen to the dead in conjunction with demonic spirits, Anan, false prophets and fortune tellers, those who attempt to cast spells. Enchanting frauds who try to make things appear differently than they really are, those using smoke and mirrors to misdirect people's attention and to invert reality in order to cloud and conceal the truth, like Ka, similar to the Palishti, the foreign foes who invaded the Promised Land, invoking fear, while separating and terrorizing, Palishti, to occupy and divide as adversarial foreigners, transliterated Philistines, invasive militant barbarians, from Palish, to attack, overrun, attempt to occupy, and be divisive and palates, to terrorize and invoke instability and fear. And with Wabar, the young men who are conceived and brought forth as the fruit and offspring, Yeled, the children who are born in travail, of foreigners, Nakrim, of those who are alien and estranged by observing a different religion, they clasp hands in anger and strike, Sapek, they shake hands in malice and derision. Yashar, salvation is from Yahowah, Isaiah 2:6. Jews have not been Yahweh, beloved by and related to Yah for nearly 30 centuries. Shortly after being brought together and into Yerushalayim by Daud, the beloved, they rejected the covenant, estranging themselves from the family of God. Rather than reveling 382 inches and promoting the Berith, they would turn to Babel, the confounding mix of religion and politics which would beget Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, indeed, both Roman Catholicism and Israel as the nation exists today. Quite literally, exactly as Yahowah foretold, to be Jewish no longer has anything to do with Jacob, the father of the nation, and all to do with one's adherence to Orthodox Judaism. Born and bred in Babel, the confusion of Babylon, the Talmud is a huge part of the problem, but so is the cultic spirituality of Kabbalah and the Zohar. Both are filled with the mythology conceived in Babylon. But this is not a Jewish problem alone. The religion with the most in common with Babel is Christianity. Its Bible shares the same spelling as Babel, Barrel, and is a compound of Bar, with and Bel, the Lord. It features the same Trinity, an affinity for crosses and steeples, for Sunday worship, for Easter and Christmas, for a dying and resurrected God, for baptism and communion, and both call their God, the Lord. There is another prophecy here that Yahowah, of course, also got right. The people who erroneously claim to be the Palishti embody the meaning of the word. The Muslims falsely presenting themselves as Palestinians are foreign invaders trying to separate Jews from the land through terrorism. Considering the fact that their entire existence is based upon a lie and that all of their claims are fraudulent, it's truly amazing that the one thing religious zealots and progressive Jews share in common is a desire to clasp hands and strike out against Israel. As we progress in our study of Yashar, Isaiah and arrive at the 17th and 18th chapters, we will witness Yahowah's overt animosity toward the United States. But there is a hint of that here. The US claims to be exceptional, a nation of manifest destiny. It boasts the 383 world's largest military and spy apparatus, more extensive and menacing than the rest of the world combined. There is no end to the nation's weaponry. And the bankrupt country flaunts its wealth, claiming to be the richest on earth. And it is the same nation which is seeking to impose the two-state solution, demanding that Israel carve out a homeland for the Palestinians. And America may be the most Babel, I mean Christian, on earth, with churches in every city and town. Their land, Eres, their material realm, is filled and satisfied, male, vociferously boasting, with silver and gold, Kezifwazahab, yearnings for money, property, and gold. And there is no end, Wa and Kaseh, and there is no limit, to their treasures, La Ozar, their wealth, treasury, storerooms, arsenals, and vaults. Their land, Eres, their material realm, is filled, male, vociferously boasting and satisfied, with swift stallions, Sus, and there is no limit, Wa and Kaseh, and there is no end, to their war chariots, La Merkabah, to the approach of their military vehicles ridden by soldiers. Yashar, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 2:7. The richest and most militant land on earth is also the one whose constitution prohibits any sanction against the free expression of religion. And should you wonder why Yahowah would express his frustration against a nation other than Israel, or one that is enslaving his people, the numbers alone tell the tale. There are as many Jews living in the United States as there are in Israel. And the US supplies more weapons to Israel's enemies than all other nations combined. Further, it was America's invasion of Iraq that set the stage for a final Islamic assault against God's people. Their land, Eres, their material realm, is filled, male, vociferously boasting and satisfied, with 384 religious images and false gods, Allel, worthless exhortations to worship, the artifacts of ineffectual faith, false prophets and fraudulent shepherds, pagan beliefs which are for naught, the work of their hands, Lamase Yod, the result of their influence and power. They bow down, Shakar, they prostrate themselves in worship, for that which they have engaged in and acted upon, La Asherasar, by performing as they do, with their grasping, Etzbahem, with their fingers and as a result of their diversity. Yashar, salvation is from Yahowah, Isaiah 2:8. I wonder if any nation has ever been as persistent in explaining why they intend to meddle in the affairs of other nations and then be preoccupied with soliciting acceptance and forming alliances. The notion that a God capable of creating an entire universe and filling it with life would want a product of his creation to bow down and worship him is so utterly preposterous and demeaning. It begs the question, why is bowing down in fear and submission so ubiquitous among believers, that we call those who demean God in this way religious? So, why, humankind, Adam, mankind, bows down in submission and fear, Shakak, is reduced, collapsing in grief, is downcast through prostration and desperation, cast down to the blackness of the pit, sacrificed, slain, and slaughtered. Each and almost every individual, each mortal man, is humiliated and humbled, Shafal, is defeated and shamed, subjugated and abased, brought down by becoming lowly and little. So do not accept them, support them, endure them, or respect them, al-Nasalahem, do not lift them up, do not promote, tolerate, or accommodate them, do not forgive them or envy them, do not pick them up or bear them, do not provide for them or be in debt to them, do not 385 receive them in a friendly manner because they are nasher, beguiling, deceitful, delusional, conniving, and confiscatory. Yashar, freedom is from Yahowah, Isaiah 2:9. Clearly, God is not advocating coexistence, tolerance, inclusion, or multiculturalism. If you want to be accepted by God, reject religion. Do not bow down. Do not submit. Never fear. Do not respect, support, or accept any human institution. Fortunately, we can dispense with the next verse. The incongruent change of voice was a rabbinic addition and not found in any Qumran scroll. This then takes us to the 11th, which in the great Isaiah scroll reads, Then, and, from one Kesser, the haughty and arrogant, Gabuth, the conceited attitude of high-ranking officials, the inappropriate pride and artificially elevated status of the exalted and empowered, from Gobar, the lofty spatial dimensions, appearance, perspective, and perceptions, ein, observations, eyes, sight, and looks of mankind, Adam, humankind, shall be diminished and degraded, Shafal, will be brought down and lowered, humbled and shamed, humiliated and abased, overthrown and depressed, from one Kesser, reducing and collapsing, Shakak, crumbling and disintegrating, bowing down while grieving, the spatial dimensions, room, the height and mass, the power and ability, the unwarranted status and self-proclaimed superiority, the exalted rebellion as a result of the overbearing haughtiness of those individuals, Ishim. So, approaching, La, the set-apart nature of, bad, alone, by oneself, set apart from all else, a portion that is part of the whole of, Yahowah, the proper pronunciation of the name of Yahovah, our Eloah, God as directed in his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence and our Shalam, 386 restoration, will be inaccessible, Segab, too high and lofty, in, bar, within and with, that day which is his day, Ha-Yawm Ha-Hu. Yashar, salvation is from Yahowah, Isaiah 2:11. Those who are self-reliant, in addition to those who choose to rely on their religion or country, will find themselves estranged from God upon his return. We know this because the second condition of the covenant requires God's children to trust and rely upon Yahowah instead of these human constructs, thereby walking away to engage with God. Yahowah will not accept divided loyalties. There are several ways to be diminished. First, those who seek authority and status will have it taken away from them by God. The most highly esteemed will become the least regarded. Second, those who have no affinity for the things of God, along with those who are beguiled into believing religious rubbish, will die. Their souls will be reduced to nothingness, to the point that they cease to exist. And third, those who have abused their status and authority, and have used it to deceive others regarding God, will pay for this crime. Their souls will be diminished to a singularity and incarcerated in a black hole, existing forever as a single dimension in time. God's closing statement can also be interpreted in slightly different, albeit related, ways. After he returns, it will be too late to change allegiances. For those outside of the covenant, Yahowah will become inaccessible. The gap between man and God will become too great to bridge, especially for the elitists who will be further diminished. Lastly, Bar ha-Yom ha-Hu was used to describe this as a very specific day and, therefore, as Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations. It is on this day that the fate of those who have reconciled their relationship with God and 387 those who remain in rebellion will be determined. This is the day Yahowah will return.